companies, if you start working over there, you'll be kind of working in a general kind of role, basically both backend and both Java, both front end. When you start working over there after spending 1 year or a few months, then you can dive into something which interests you more, right? About the front end engineer roles in these kind of companies, they are typically curated to the needs of a front end. So you won't be asked to work on back end and all that. So these are two different kind of profiles which you can target. So applying for SDE doesn't mean that you're not going for front end, right? So applying for SDE also means that maybe in future you can traverse towards that front end area, right? Definitely if you are a fresher. Okay. About the difference between the SDE and front end interviews. Even though in SDE you might find general roles, like wherein you might traverse towards the front end or back end in the near future, but there is a total lot of difference between the interviews in the front end and the SDE. You are definitely preparing for the front end interview right now, but still you have to know the difference. As I'll be teaching you some kind of, you know, DSA algorithms and all that stuff also. So you should know what kind of how much depth you have to explore for that, particular topic. So if you talk about the DSA in SDE, basically dynamic programming, trees, graphs theory, these are the topics which they mostly rely on. And they are basically, if you see, they are, they mostly rely on these kind of topics, and you'll be getting a lot of questions from them. For front end engineer interviews, even from my experience and a lot of other people's experience, they mostly ask you questions on arrays, stacks, basic queues, hash table. Hashmap and hash table is something which is their favorite. So I recently gave an Uber interview, and in that, I got a question to implement the hash map, right? So, implement the hash map in JavaScript, complete get, put, post, and get, put, and all those operations. And maybe they give you some kind of twist in that question, like you have to be, improve the complexity, you have to do this, you have to do that. But hash map is something which is going to be your best friend in data structures and algorithms. So in a lot of questions, you can use them. And for front end, this is something which they'll definitely ask you for. And also searching and sorting heavy. So in searching, basically, if you see like normal searching, linear searching, binary search is again one of their favorite topics. In sorting, you have quick sort, merge sort. So mostly in all those topics, if you see, they'll ask you to implement stuff, or maybe a quotient, a data structures quotient, a lead code or hacker rank quotient, in which you have to use these algorithms, these data structures to solve the quotient. So this is about the data structure. You should know like where you want to concentrate more. So like being a front-end engineer, you don't have to concentrate much on dynamic programming, trees, graph theory. Just pick up those topics in which, basically they are most likely to ask you questions, and just ace those topics. And also about the design. So design is something which most people just drop off, or feel that even though for freshers, they do expect some kind of design approach. Nowadays, it's a hotcake in the market. As you know, you must have heard about system design. System design is basically high level design. High level design is basically distributed systems, like where to place this load balancer, how to distribute stuff, so that your product is scalable. So that is basically for the software development engineer position, like one who works with the backend, one who works with databases. And they also have HLD, LLD, low level design, class diagrams, and all that. So you don't have to worry about these things. In the near future, if you traverse towards the backend stuff, then you definitely have to worry. Let's say you're working as a SD new grad, or maybe front end engineer, and you want to be on a upper level. So definitely you have to have this as the as system design knowledge. But for us as a front end engineers, we need to work upon something which is called product design. Facebook calls this product design. So a friend of mine recently got this interview, and she was literally asked, like, since you are having an experience in front end, so your system design round will be curated towards mostly towards the front end, and that would be product designing, like state management, what kind of component architecture do you use, RESTful services, and like how can you improve the performance and all that. So it's more towards the front end area. And basically, obviously, you should have some kind of UX knowledge also, little bit of UX knowledge. So you don't have to worry about the databases and connecting and load balancers and all that stuff. So just, you have to work on this part also. Apart from this this part also, because you'll be, in any case, even if you're working at front end, but you'll be part of the team which is, working for a bigger goal. And being a part of team, you might have to contribute to them. So that's why you must know the design knowledge also. Apart from it, what these FAANG companies, not even the FAANG, even talk about the PayPal or who are not in the FAANG but are really good companies, what they expect from a front end candidate. Right now, you guys are working on React, you are going through it, I know that. But apart from it, this you must have some kind of light UX design kind of knowledge. Like whenever something comes up in your head, or someone asks you a question like design this or design that, or maybe create a widget, maybe create a carousel widget, maybe create a tooltip. So these are some small widgets, but they might ask you to design Facebook, not the system design but the product design. In that case, you must have some kind of light UX design knowledge, like where to place this, where to place that, and all that. That's not your job to actually do that working at the company, but you must have that kind of knowledge. Again, like it adds up to your points. And the second most important thing is strong vanilla JavaScript fundamentals. This is something which most of the developers, most of the senior developers, they think that just working with the framework would help them out. But I'm telling you this thing, FAANG companies would literally tell you, we don't want to use any framework. This would be their first requirement, that you should not use any framework and you should go with a strong basic fundamental JavaScript stuff like ESS and ES6 syntax, arrow functions and all that, and you do the job. So this is something which you have to work through this. A lot of people feel that they might just work with the frameworks and all that and they can get through it. Maybe for a few startups it's okay, but it is something which will back your entire knowledge of React also, as you know that React is built upon JavaScript itself. So it's good to know the knowledge of these concepts. And I'm telling you this, once you clear all these JavaScript fundamental concepts, right, there is no framework which you cannot work upon. You just ask them to give you a week or so and you can come up, you can basically be, I won't say you'll be master at something, but you'll be good with that kind of framework because you have the basics knowledge. Apart from it, obviously HTML, CSS. Again, in this area also, most of the people think that, for example, in VS Code we have a lot of extensions, for the HTML boilerplate. But I'm telling you this again, when you are in an interview with companies, big companies, they won't expect you to, they'll give you a notepad or something, right? So over there you will have to write the entire HTML boilerplate, right? So starting from the HTML tags, meta tags, and body tags. The meta tag you can skip, but again, it's good to provide meta tags wherein you provide extra information for the search engine optimization and all that. So being in this industry, I've seen that a lot of people use shortcuts and all that, but this HTML stuff, starting with the boilerplate, it's something which you'll require. You might require, right? Apart from the CSS. Again, for the CSS, mostly misconception people say, even people working at Google and all that, they literally say that CSS is something which we use, Chrome developer tools, and we just randomly or basically hit and trial. If you want to change the, a lot of people don't know how to center an element, like vertically align an element or horizontally align an element. It is simply easy, like nowadays using display flex and all that, but you must know all those properties. You must know which property is wrong and which property might work. I'm not saying to memorize everything in your head, but the thing is, the hit and trial cases, if you try, like, those can be reduced if you have the backing, of the basic knowledge of CSS also. And apart from it, the latest trends, just a second, latest trends as an ES6 syntax, especially ES6, because in JavaScript in ES6, they made a lot of changes like adding promises and arrow functions, let const variables and all that. So that was a major change in history of JavaScript. And that's why everyone demands that you must be well versed with ES6 syntax. You can skip ES7 and add 8, because if you do ES6, 7 and 8 are nothing to, they just came year after year. So there was not a major improvement in them. It's just that async await came in ES7 and or maybe ES8. So it's not a big deal, but you have to know about the latest trends as you're working with React also. So, you must be aware about the state management libraries. It's not just Redux. We have a lot of other stuff as well. So even if you're not using React, so we are still having a lot of JavaScript libraries to manage the state. So everything you should be well versed. So this is something which they expect from a front end candidate. Okay, you obviously you cannot master everything, but you can be good at everything. And the thing is, you have to cover these breadth of topics, because just imagine that assume that, actually not imagine, that the interviewer is sitting in front of you and trying to cut away your points, like, which, this is what happens in Amazon when you get a bar raiser interview. So what he does, he has having no relation to the interview process. He comes so that he might find some flaws with the candidate, whether the front end or back end doesn't matter to him. So that's why you just have to reduce the probability. You have just to minimize the a possibility of getting your points off. So that's why you have to cover all these breadth of the topics also, system design, as in product design, and all these stuff. Apart from it, let's move forward. Just let me know if I'm a little bit fast, right? Hello.
It's fine for me.
Okay, because
That's fine.
apart from it, let's come towards the JavaScript. And I'm telling you, I love JavaScript. And why? Because I know the fundamentals. Once you go through all these fundamental things, you'll start loving JavaScript. People say that JavaScript is something which we hate, and I have seen this. It's like JavaScript, one of the language which is most loved and most hated in the entire world. Why most hated? Because people don't know about the basics, right? Like, there are a lot of concepts, like you can actually print the variable before even declaring, initializing it, and all that, and nothing bad happens. So it's not some kind of magic. It's the basic JavaScript concepts. So about that, these are, we have important topics for the interviews in JavaScript. Variable and function hoisting, you must have heard this hoisting word. It's nothing but the way how JS engine operates. So they just give, a kind of fancy word to it, and people feel that it's kind of a big concept and all. No, it is not. It is just how the JS engine works. So if you understand this, you're never gonna miss out on hoisting and all that stuff. About scopes, local, global, lexical. You must have heard about local scope, global scope, but not the lexical one. Might. Okay. About the prototype chaining and prototypal inheritance, it is also good. So if you see this keyword, if a newbie or if a fresher sees this keyword, he'll see that it might be, prototypal inheritance might be related to something like Java inheritance or something, but it is not. It is totally different, and it is much easier. I'm telling you, it is much easier. Debouncing and throttling, this is again, these are, people feel that these are something which came from JavaScript. No, these are some kind of 4 to 5 lines of algorithm, so that your system is scalable. As in, for example, I'll tell you in a very short example. Let's say you have a button, and a user, let's say you have a website, and you have a cart, add to cart button, and obviously customer can click on that button multiple times, right? So take the worst case. A customer is kind of, something bad happens, or customer is irritated, or he or she clicks on the button 1,000 times, like 1,000 times in 2 or 3 seconds somehow. Or maybe you write a code for that. Okay, JavaScript code for it. So what happens? That add to cart option, that add to cart button is clicked literally 1,000 times, and that 1,000 API requests are made. So do you want this in your system? Definitely no. You don't want it, because that would, maybe if the API request is pretty much light, then there might not be an issue. But if it's heavy, then your system definitely would go down, because let's say 1,000 users are clicking that button 1,000 times in 2 or 3 seconds. Just imagine that kind of thing. So there comes to stop them to do it. Actually, not stop them, to basically allow them and still not hitting the API request at the backend. So it's just way of doing things, debouncing and throttling. And it works for Java, it works for JavaScript, Python, you can implement it anywhere. It's not a JavaScript concept. But this is something which is a quite good interview topic, because they literally ask you, like, write the debouncing logic. What is debouncing? What is throttling? And implement that in your own language, whatever you want to do. Again, context switching using call, apply, bind. These are some very important concepts. And like, if you have heard about this keyword, so this is something which is pretty much confusing for a lot of people across the entire web developer community when they are working with core JavaScript. So they pretty much get confused. But so changing the context of this keyword according to the situation are handled by call, apply, and bind. And again, they are pretty much easy. I'm telling you, all these concepts are very easy, but pretty much hot cake in the interview market, because people don't know it. People are, they skip these kind of concepts, and that's why they become the part of the interview process. So they want to take people who are pretty much good at it. Again, map, reduce, and filter. These are again, some pretty much good concept. These are kind of, you can say, wrappers on normal for loop, and wherein you don't have to worry about the edge cases and all that. And these are pretty much helpful. I'm telling you this thing, map reducing filter. Like uh, I have been using this a lot, even solving DSA questions and all that. Wherever I feel that these things will help me to not worry about the edge cases, I do that. I just simply use them. About the this keyword, again, this is something, this keyword is pretty much helpful in context switching and all that stuff, and it is a very important part of the JavaScript. Event loop, again, event loop, I'll be telling you about the event loop also, what it does, how it does. So event loop is something which, you can say that when a few things are in queue, right, this is a job of the event loop to execute everything which is remaining, which is pending. Let's say there are a lot of callback functions which is pending due to the set timeout and all that stuff. So I'll be diving into these topics at later point of time. Callback functions, again, a lot of people, they they think, or you can say that they are not good at callback. They feel that they're not pretty much not handy with callback functions. So this is again the most important part of JavaScript. You have to work upon these also, deep copy and shallow copy. So it's again a very much important interview question. It was also asked by Facebook to a couple of friends of mine. And in this, like, basically, even the name suggests that you have to copy something deeply and copy something shallow. So there are multiple ways to do this thing, like using recursion, going deeper and deeper nested levels, like deep copy a array, deep copy a linked list, deep copy of array of arrays, like multi-dimensional arrays. So it's again, pretty much easy thing, not tough. But if you don't know it, if someone shoots you in front of you in the interview, and if you haven't done it previously, that might be, you might take a lot of time to solve it, or it might take a, basically it would be, go against you if you are not able to solve it. These are something which you should know at every point of time. DOM manipulation, obviously DOM APIs, to how to manipulate the DOM. They'll ask you to create widgets, they'll ask you to, randomly ask you to do something on the DOM. So you have to know about this also. This is the, core part of the JS, because we use JS for the DOM manipulation, so that we can display stuff on HTML, that page, about the ES6 syntax. So as I told you, this is very important because in ES6 they introduced a lot of important concepts, and it was a major breakthrough when it came. Arrow functions. Arrow functions replaced the normal functions, and again, when arrow functions got introduced, there were a lot of changes in this keyword also. People started getting confused, like how this operates in arrow functions. So this operates differently in normal functions, and this operates differently in arrow functions, this keyword. About the classes, so like classes are something which is a concept borrowed from object oriented programming, like from Java and Python. Even in Python most of the people don't use it, but classes are basically nothing but syntactic sugar on top of what we already having, like constructor functions. So classes were introduced in ES6. Again, classes, why classes are helpful? Because let's say you are you are in front of the Amazon interviewer, and in Amazon mostly they work upon, even though you are the front end, but mostly they work upon the Java language, right? So in Java, if you know that Java is an object oriented language, and people use classes. Classes are pretty much important to components at the everything, what you create and all that. So if you start using classes while solving a JavaScript question, so it will be like you are creating a component which can be reused. So classes are pretty much helpful in creating reusable components, and that would be pretty much good in front of the interviewer. So that is good. Like classes is something which is borrowed from the object oriented programming, and if you show these skills, that would gain you more points. About the let and const keywords, so again, let and const is something which you might have heard of, but people use it, but they don't know the basics how let and const works. Because as I told you, this hosting works differently with var and differently with let and const. Generators, okay. And apart from it, promises you might have definitely used in React.js, but promises is not the React.js concept or Angular concept. It actually came from Es6 syntax and from JavaScript. So promises is again, it's pretty much useful when you have to consume a promise, you have to create a promise and all that, in hope of getting a value out of it. So that's it about this topic. So you can like make a list of them, and we can start working upon it. But these are some very important topics for the interviews. They'll ask you to create a promise, they'll ask you to implement your own promise chain and all that stuff. So mostly These are the concepts, and these are something which they'll ask you to implement directly. Apart from it, in the DSA, which is my favorite part, uh, you can have questions from arrays, basic arrays, manipulations, and all that. Stacks. So you must know stack data structure, basics of stack data structure. You don't have to dive much into it. Queue. Queue is very much important because queue is something which is actually used by the event loop. So event loop picks stuff from the queue and it pushes the stuff from the queue which is pending into the call stack of the JavaScript engine. So queue is important because you must know queue, and queue is basically FIFO, first in first out. So you must know it. Linked list. So you can get a lot of linked list questions also, like traverse the linked list, how to traverse, how to find the cycle in a linked list, and all those kind of questions. It's not that hard. Hashmap, as I told you, hashmap is their favorite part. You'll at some point of time of of your entire journey of front end engineering, you'll definitely use hash maps a lot more than any other data structure, because hash map is pretty much fast. Everything is done in big of one complexity, almost all the operations, if you don't take in consideration the clashing and all. And about the trees, you must know about the binary search tree, the basics, and the traversals as in order, pre-order, and post-order. The graph theory. About the graph theory is basically an intensive part in basically SDE interviews, but still you have to know DFS and BFS, depth first search and breadth first search. DFS is nothing. DFS is just a recursive 3 or 4 lines something. You give a base case and you do the job. You don't have to do anything. The loop, the recursive thing does everything by itself. And the BFS, breadth first search. So internally, BFS uses Q to for its algorithm. So that's why everything is connected, as I'm telling you. So DFS and BFS is something which you should know. Heap heap is something which definitely they're not going to ask you, but there are a lot of questions on lead code, hacker rank, and general questions which you can solve easily using heap, because heap is something which is already implemented, like in languages like Python and Java. They've already implemented heap, so you just have to import that stuff. Heap is, you can provide a solution for a question, and you can say that there is an alternate solution using heap also. There was some point of time when even I didn't do heap because you don't see a lot of questions on heap. But heap is something which can provide a lot of solutions for questions which are having more complexity. So I think you should do it. You probably won't be asked this concept, but still you must do it. As in, you have to know how to use it. Don't get much into it, but you have to know how to use it. About the sorting techniques, quick sort, again, about these all these sorting techniques, what they can ask you is to implement them, right? So if I'm talking about the basic of DSA, they'll definitely ask you to implement everything of. So like implement merge sort, implement heap sort, implement counting sort, implement quick sort. So you should know it, because obviously no one uses, no one creates a merge sort function in an interview and then use it. You always use inbuilt library functions. Let's say in JavaScript, in Python we have tim sort, in JavaScript we have normal sort, and I think that's implemented on a merge sort concept. And so you directly use it. But there might be situations, I'll tell you about the counting sort. There might be situations wherein they'll give you a question and they'll give you constraints, as in you can see that, like, constraints as in you have the input range or the total array length. So in that case, you can think of, like, it might be quicksort can be an easy approach, merge sort can be an easy approach, or maybe counting sort, or maybe heap sort. So still, you should know all these concepts. They might ask you to implement it, or you might face situations wherein you have to use one of them. And the best would be, let's say out of these four, best would be counting, or best would be heap sort. And for that, you have to know where to use which. About the searching techniques, you can have linear search and binary search. Linear search you mostly do, but the binary search is something which is pretty much helpful. Like binary search, as you must all be knowing. If you're not, then if an array is already sorted, you basically get to have, you can work upon the binary search, and it's pretty much fast. It drops down the complexity to log n. Apart from it, nothing more in the slides. And just give me a thumbs up that you went through all this stuff, like I'm sharing it with you. So just give me a thumbs up, like everyone is fine with it. Hello.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so I'll start with the JavaScript. Like how much time we have remaining. I'll spend some time on JavaScript, and then I can spend some time on the DSA algorithms and all that. Okay, let me connect my. So now I'll be asking you a few questions from you, right? So you have to be a little bit interactive. Jeez. These are some basic standard questions because they are building blocks. So I just want to ask you about this. This is the code. Just everyone, everyone, you can turn on your mics and all so that you can just respond. So this is the coding question, coding basically basic JavaScript code. And just tell me what is the difference between this function and this function? It's a basic question. Whatever you feel about, just let me know. So we have great.
Jatin, we're not seeing your screen.
Okay,
Yeah, we can only see your slides right now.
okay. Just a bit. New share. Just one. Yeah. So can you see my screen now?
Yep.
This kind of question is always asked by professors. Can you see my screen? I didn't expect myself to ask this question from you guys. Okay.
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay, so you have this code, right? So there are two functions in front of you. And just tell me the difference between this function and this function. Whatever you have in your head. Because I'll be showing you some magic, which people think that JavaScript has a lot of magic stuff. But that's not the magic, that's basic stuff. So just tell me about these two functions. What do you feel that how these functions are different, or maybe they are similar, or anything like that? Just spend some, maybe a minute or so. We have two functions, function display, it is doing something, and again a function, which is literally, in a different kind of way, directly implemented, but it again does something. So what is the difference between doing it this way and doing it this way?
In the second case, we are storing the function in an object,
Mhm.
EISP,
Okay.
and so that's one difference. But I do not know like how will they interact. Like the first one is like the conventional method which we follow. We never store the function in a variable.
Okay. uh,
There must be some disadvantage to the second one.
it's not like there is disadvantage or advantage. It's like the way we declare functions to be used, right? So we can use this function using this variable. Okay, over here, this is an anonymous function which is assigned to a variable, right? So we can use anyway whatever we want, but they do look different, right? So there is a entire, this is a pretty much good interview question, and I must tell you, like, what is the difference between these functions, or what will be the output and all that. So anyone else? I just want to know your views. That's why, you'll be whatever the gap of the knowledge which you are having right now, you'll be clearing off, because you might have some right knowledge about something, but you are not confident enough, or maybe you have something wrong knowledge about something and which you might want to correct it, because it is an interview question. I must tell you, it is an interview question. So interview comes in front of you, it simply shares the screen, and just like I am doing, it will he will write the code in a jiffy, or maybe just like I have written already, and he'll ask you like, what is the difference between this function and this function? Anyone else? It is a building block. I'll be telling you the entire concept. There is no issue. I'll be telling you the entire concept. We have time right now, like how everything is done, but just any view in your head going.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but does hoisting have anything to do with the second declaration?
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Hoisting definitely have to do with the second declaration, but anything more, like about this keyword hoisting. This is what happens with people. Like, they have something about, hoisting is something, but clarity. Do you have any more clarity, deeper clarity?
I would say, well, like I have a basic knowledge of hoisting, so basically, it doesn't matter where you use the function as long as it's hoisted, I
Right.
believe. Like you can use it below or above before declaring it or after declaring it. Like it doesn't matter if you do it like you did with the second type of declaration.
Correct.
At least that's how much I know of hoisting. So yeah, you can give some more knowledge to me about that. Yeah.
So this explanation which you gave is correct, but this is not which you are supposed to give in front of the interview. You have to amaze the interviewer. I'm telling you this thing. Once he or she gets amazed, you are in. So you even at some point of time, even I used to give some this kind of explanation because when we don't have 100% clarity, we kind of still have doubt about something which we are speaking. So you are totally correct. You are not wrong. But I'll tell you what is actually the hoisting. What happens? So if I try to print out, just tell me the output, right? If I try to print out over here and calling this function over here. So guess what is the output? So the output over here would be the basic normal. It will display, right? So we are creating a function and we are calling after creating a function. Okay. Now we are creating a function again and we are calling after. So I'll show you some magic. Again, it's a gotcha kind of magic thing. It's not really a magic. So I'll just take this display call, the call function over here. Again, this is going to work. Just okay, this is going to work. But just see, we are calling it on top and we are declaring this function. Basically, the function is getting memory over here. So as you see the code by your naked eyes. So this is perfectly working. Okay, so we'll try another thing. If we try to push this on top, maybe even this works. So what is the output? Like what will be the output of this change? Anyone?
Yeah, I think it should be the same.
Okay, let's see. So disp is not a function; it's a type error. So what actually happened over here? It's a pretty much good interview question. I'm telling you guys, it's a pretty much good interview question because it is all about scopes and hoisting. So what just happened over here? We tried this function; it perfectly worked. If you see, it perfectly worked. Still, it perfectly worked. But this disp, it's throwing a type error. This is type error, right? Type error because it sees that disp is not a function. Like we are calling disp is a variable. We are calling disp is as a, using these open and closed brackets. But JS engine says that disp is not a function. So what is the reason this is not a function? Maybe it didn't give error, reference error that disp doesn't exist. It is giving a type error as in it is not a function. It's like we just removed this thing and we are calling it, right? So here hoisting is a pretty much beautiful concept. I'll tell you more about it. But what happened is before we ran this, right, we thought that this will be getting a function as value and we'll be simply calling it. But when we ran, this disp was not having this function value. And why this happened, I'll tell you entirely. Don't get confused and all. But this is a pretty much good question which can be asked in the interview, which has been asked. So let's move towards the main explanation part of this thing. I'll have a lot of questions which are dependent upon this. So, this is some English keywords and all that. Hoisting is JavaScript default behavior of moving declarations to the top of their containing scope. Okay. When a JavaScript code is interpreted, the interpreter invisibly moves all the variable and the function declarations to the top of the scope they are declared in. A lot of English keywords, right? So let's move towards the explanation part. You don't have to worry about this. I'll stop sharing the screen. I'll share the iPad screen so that I can, annotate everything what I have in my head. Yeah, sure. Is everyone with me? So the code which we were having was basically this was the code which we were having, right? Function this. I'm just writing log for the short console.log. Whatever. So we have a beautiful concept of hoisting. As you read also, hoisting is something when which you place, the JS engine automatically places it on top and all that. You don't have to worry about all these English keywords once you understand the core concept of how JS engine operates. There is nothing called they put it on top and all that stuff. Just don't care about that. So let's take a better example than this. Let's take a pretty much basic, and let's say we have var x equal to 10. Okay, and we are logging it. These are just 2 lines of code which we are having. Okay, so what happens? I'll tell you something about execution context. Okay, execution context is a very important part because before learning of scope and hoisting and all those, a lot of JavaScript concept, we have to know about the execution context, which is the how JS engine works. Now, whenever you write a code in JavaScript, it can be an empty code, it can be nothing. Whenever you run a JS file, I must say, whenever you run a JS file, it can contain 400 lines of code or maybe 4 lakh lines of code or maybe nothing. Something happens. Something happens. There is a call stack. You must know, you must have been heard about call stack in JavaScript or maybe in Java also. So in that call stack, an execution context is put in. That is the global execution context. What is this global execution context? It is kind of a wrapper. It is kind of a wrapper in which everything happens, like virtual kind of thing. It's kind of a wrapper in which everything, the JavaScript code runs and after that it prints. We have 2 phases. Just listen this carefully because this concept is something which will fetch you a lot of marks, points, and this is something which is asked by interviews or maybe online assessment also, wherein you have maybe 100 lines of code and they ask you output. They ask you to debug it. So if you understand this thing, you'll take just 1 minute or maybe 1.5 minute max at max, and you'll get the answer. And also this is going to help you in future concepts. So we have 2 phases: memory phase and the code execution phase. So we have 2 phases. Just remember this thing: memory phase and the code execution phase. What happens in the memory phase is JavaScript skims our code twice. You never know about this thing, but JavaScript from top to bottom, line by line, skims the code twice. The first time it does it for memory phase. Memory phase is something wherein a lot of things which require memory, JavaScript engine assigns it a memory. And then there are, if you can see that memory phase is in compile time execution and code execution phase is in runtime execution. So if you must have heard in your undergrad or in, these are some concepts which are pretty much common in Java. So what happens is, when JavaScript skims the code the first time, it goes from top to bottom, line by line. Just remember this thing, JavaScript doesn't skip anything. Okay, it goes from line by line. So it encounters this line. Okay, it sees that in the memory phase there is something which is waiting to have memory from. So X is declared using var, and it sees that X needs some kind of memory to store the variable. So what it does is, it creates key value pair in the memory phase. This is key, same as the name of the variable, and this is the value. Value is not 10. The value is not 10 because the assignment is a part of the code execution phase. I'll tell you, I'll print out it in front of you and all that. So what it assigns is, it assigns undefined. Undefined is a keyword which means nothing in JavaScript. Now it moves towards the next line. It sees that there is something logging, and log x basically means that console.log x printing. So this console.log is actually not the part of JavaScript engine. It is a DOM API which browser provides. So it is nothing. Printing something doesn't require any kind of memory. There is something which is already stored in the memory, and printing picks up and just prints in front of the screen. It's like a input and output thing. So it sees that logix doesn't require any kind of memory, so it just drops it. Now the second phase. In second phase, it again sees that 10 is being assigned to the variable x. Okay, so this is a part of the code execution phase. So we see that 10 is being assigned, we simply assign 10 to this. Undefined is removed. Now it sees that logging x. So log x is a part of the code execution phase, and simply we get the output as x. X basically means that which is 10. So we get this output. So every code in front of you, whichever you see, like the code, if we see the disp function, display function and all that, or even 100 lines of code, you have to go through this way. Maybe you are working on it, just the, first time, but when you get into it, it will take 10 or 12 seconds to traverse through all the code, and you will know what is undefined, what is 10 and all that stuff. You will just take 10 to 15 seconds at max, and you will solve the problem. So what will be the output and all that. So this is how memory and code execution phase works. So you got these three concepts. Just keep in mind the execution context, the memory phase, and the code execution phase. And after the job of JavaScript is done, after it does everything, it sees that my code has been done, so it removes this execution context. The job of JavaScript is to create the execution context, put it into the call stack, do the job, traverse throughout the code, whatever we are printing, it will do, apply all the logic, apply all the business logic and all. Then it will remove the execution context. You don't see it. I'll show you in Chrome Developer Tools how it works, but like using debugging tools and all that. But this is how JavaScript engine works. Every line, it sees if it requires a memory or not. If it requires the memory, it assigns it. And it assigns basically variables are assigned undefined. And then the code execution phase, we get 10 assigned to be x. So if you see, if I do this, if I log x over here, what will happen? JavaScript traverses again. Let's say we don't have the we traverse through the memory phase. So it sees that log is not a part of memory phase. So we won't, it basically skips it. It doesn't do anything kind of thing. So it basically skips it. This is skip. Okay. In this part, what happens? Memory is assigned like this. Okay. And again, this is skip. Okay. In the second iteration, second skimming, what happens? It sees that there is a printing of x. So it actually prints x, and x is what over here? X is undefined, because we are printing before initializing this 10 to this x. We are already printing before, so we print undefined. And this log fetches you 10. Why? Because we are doing it after assigning the value, after assigning 10. Now the interview question is, okay, undefined can be pretty much obvious that X hasn't been defined. So why is there not any kind of error, type error or reference error or any weird value? And why did we get undefined? As you see in the memory phase, it actually skipped log X. It didn't do anything for the log X. It basically skipped it. And then it found that 10 was actually being assigned in the code execution phase. So see, this log X will print undefined, and the same log X will print 10. Just tell me that you got this. Like just give me a thumbs up. Is everyone here?
How do you thumbs up?
Okay, you just gave me a thumbs up. Okay. What about you, Eric?
Yeah, how do you thumbs up?
Okay, thumbs up as in just say that yes, hi, and all that. Like I got it.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, so right, this is how the JavaScript engine works. And now we'll work through pretty much good examples, and I'll tell you like what happens like in those examples. So just remember this screen in front of you. I cannot have both screens, but maybe I can wait over there. Mm. So now let's go back to the code. Let's see this function. This will be different. So just tell me what will be the output for this code. Just one line code in JavaScript. Remember all those two phases, memory phase and the code execution phase. And remember, this is the only code in front of you. You can be wrong, it's totally okay. Just tell me what will be the output for this. You just see one code line in front of you, nothing else. Okay. So again, this is an interview question. So what will be the output for this line? You have the options A, B, C, D, some value, undefined, type error, reference error, whatever you want.
I would say it's D, reference error.
Reference error, correct. And why is that?
Because we've not given a declaration to name, so name is not stored as a key value pair in the memory phase.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Correct. Did everyone get this? Yeah, I'm assuming that everyone got this. If you haven't got this, just raise your hand or just speak up. It's okay, totally fine. I can tell you maybe 100 times. It's totally fine, because these are some. I'm telling you, these are some core concepts, and these are, you must have seen these kind of questions printing. What would be the output and all that in online assessments, or maybe examination, separate examination. And people feel that we are not able to do this because we are good at theory, but we are not good at we're not good at theory, but we are good at practical. But that is not the case. Everything goes hand in hand. So if you know the basics now you know the memory execution phase and that code execution phase basic, you can easily know that this thing is not going to work, because we actually never did, memory phase for name never happened. But if we try to do this, the output would be, I'll tell you before doing this. So see, name is not defined, reference error. And also, this is again a thing, when someone asks you what will be the output, you tell that error. Error is pretty much ambiguous. In assessments also, you actually get this kind of question, that would it be a type error or reference error? You have to know. Why is it a reference error? A reference is basically, we are trying to reference an address. something, something which is in the memory, either in the heap or wherever it is in the memory. But name is something which never got any memory, not undefined, no value, nothing at all. So if we're trying to print that thing, it doesn't exist in our JS engine. In that execution context, no memory phase happened. Okay, but if we try to do this, if we try to print this, it will perfectly work. Sample. Even though if we try to put this below this would work. But the output would be different. Why? Because as I told you in the memory phase, this line is skipped, totally skipped. JavaScript engine goes towards this line and it sees that something needs memory. Okay, it assigned memory to name key value pair. Okay, so key will be name and the value would be not sample. Value is undefined right now. Sample would be something which will be assigned in the second phase, code execution phase. So second phase starts, it sees that console.log is happening and it is a part of the code execution phase. We have to print it. It is runtime part. So it prints it. And at this point of time, name is value of undefined. And if we try to print, then we'll be undefined and sample. Again, this is an interview question. So they'll give you outputs as first will be undefined, what will be the printouts for this, and second would be sample. So people feel that the output might be sample and sample, or maybe they get confused basically. So this is undefined and this is not null, or this is not any error, right? One thing, if JavaScript engine finds that there is a reference error or type error at any line, it literally stops the execution. It clears the GEC, global execution context, and nothing happens after that. So let's say we had some kind of error over here, reference error, it won't go below this. So you have to know this. Okay, let's move towards more quality questions. I think I have covered already this. This question is already done with this concept. Okay, let's do this. And I didn't tell you about the function, right? Similarly, when we see that X is having the memory phase, function also gets the memory phase. I'll do it just in a jiffy. I'll create the new document. Maybe I can read it. Now let's talk about this function. So just remember this figure. So what happens when JS engine sees that there is some code in the file and we ran it, even though there is not some code. I'll tell you more about this execution context in maybe future classes. I have some chat undefined. Okay. Now what happens over here is, again, GEC, global execution context, is pushed in the call stack. Okay. Now the processing starts. It sees that there is a disp function. As I told you, var x gets memory, right? Similarly, disp is also stored as a key value pair. There are only two things which gets the memory like this: the variable execution context, and the function execution context. So function also gets the memory like this. So what happens over here is this function gets a memory. How it gets a memory? Just see this carefully. So we have, as I told you, there are basically key value pairs when we store it in memory. So key would be the name of the function, this colon. The value would be this entire code. Same, this entire code gets copied over here. Similarly, next time what happens, this display is normal var function, var variable, right? And it gets memory normally, as we did previously. So it's kind of a var x. It doesn't know, JavaScript skims, and it doesn't see something which is assigned. It sees that this is a part of the code execution part. right? Everything which is happening on the right part of the equality operator, assignment operator, I must say, I'm sorry. That is a part of the code execution phase. So it sees that there is a display variable and we just have to give the key as display, and the value would be undefined. The next second skimming part. So what happens in the next phase is it sees that this is a function. Uh, this is a function which has already got the memory. In the code execution phase, runtime things happen. Like if we try to call this function, if we try to print this function, if we try to assign something, that is a part of the code execution phase. So when it sees this, it basically skips it in the code execution because it is the part of the memory phase. So this is skipped. In this, we see that there is an assignment going over here. So as we assign 10 to that X variable, similarly, this entire function is assigned to it. The function log and this entire function is basically assigned to this. Just keep this in mind. Nobody called the function right now. So again, here is a gotcha over here. Again, an interview question. Let's say I deliberately created syntax errors, or not the syntax error, the reference error in the functions. Like in display, I am printing something which never existed in these two functions. But unless and until I call those functions, there won't be any error, right? Because if you see over here, these two functions got the memory. This first function got the memory. The second function is stored as a value to this display variable. Nothing is being called. But if I try to call this, let's say this. So this is in the second phase. This is the disk which is being called. This is the code execution part. So disk is already in the memory, and we call it. It easily gets called and it prints disk. Disk is printed. Now let's say we have another function call which is display. Again, display is still in memory. Display is a variable which is holding a function, so we can call it. Okay. So this function, this entire function will be called, and will be the output would be whatever. Let's say we have X over here. So this will be the output. But if we try to call this display function in the before it, like before it was, let's say we are trying to call it over here. So what wrong thing will be happen is at this point of time when JS engine was seeing this, okay, this display variable was still undefined. No function was assigned in the code execution phase because it didn't reach at that point of time at this line. As I told you, memory phase was done, display got the undefined value, and when we were coming the second time, it saw that display is a code execution part. We are calling the function, and display is actually not a function at this point of time. If you see, it's just nothing. It's a key. It's a variable which has been assigned undefined. So we cannot call it. We can print it, but we cannot call it. So everything which I'm talking, I'll show you what actually happens, right? It's not just theoretical. Chrome developer tools will be our pretty much helpful tool, which will guide us through. And if you see, like, have you all cleared what happened over here? Hello?
Yeah, I think it's clear so far. Yeah.
So these, again, I'll repeat my question that even if you have a function which is deliberately having a syntax error or type error inside it, unless and until we'll call it, it won't throw any error. So an interview question might be that you have 3 or 4 functions, and out of them, it's a normal behavior, right? We skim through the code and we see that instead of doing all this memory and code execution phase, we just traverse through the code with our naked eyes and we see that, okay, there is something bad going on inside this function and maybe it will throw an error. But what if we never call that function? So these things actually make the function call, and then we are checked that then its execution context is put in the call sec and all that happens. Now, one more thing. Okay, let's say we have a code like this. We have var x equal to 10, and we have a function, disp. It's logging something. Let's say XYZ or something. Again, I'm repeating this again and again because it is very much important. This entire thing is important. It will fetch you a lot of points. You're never gonna make mistakes. What happens in the memory phase? It skims. It sees that X needs a memory. Okay, X key and undefined is set. Okay, this is first phase going on. In the second phase, it sees that there is a function which requires a memory. Obviously, function requires a memory so that it can be called. So this is going to be disp key and value would be the entire code, whatever we wrote over here. Okay, first phase is done. In the second phase, what happens is, let's say we have a call over here also. This. Okay, in the second phase, again 10 is assigned, right? Now what happens over here? Nothing happens. Basically, it is skimmed. It is basically skipped because that was the part of the memory phase. Over here, there is a call to this function. Now just bear with me. This is an important part. We have a call to this function display. So what happens is a new execution context is created. So there are two types of execution context. A global one, which I already told you, the GEC, which is basically kind of root of everything. And one, there is a function context, function execution context. For every function, when it is being called, keep this in your head, when it is being called, okay, Prakash, Tarun Kumar, I'm getting a call from college. Yeah, so when the function actually gets called, a new EC is created. So we have an EC inside the EC, nested ECs. So just imagine, let's say we have 100 functions going around, or maybe we have 100 nested functions. So 100 ECs will be created. So what happens when it sees that there is a call to this function, an EC is created. Again, a similar kind of box. Okay, similarly, memory phase, mem phase, and the code execution phase. Okay, similarly, if we see there is something, let's say we had some more stuff inside this. Let's say instead of logging, we had another variable where y equal to 20, and we logged y, the variable itself. So what happened? Similarly, the thing which I told you, what happened? Change the color. The X will be getting key, and this will be undefined. Okay, if you see, oh sorry, y. I'm sorry, y. So y would be the key, and undefined would be the value. Okay. Next, the code sees that we have a logging over here, and nothing happens. It's basically skipped. In the code execution phase, what happens is 20 is assigned. Okay, and also logging is a part of the code execution phase, so we log it. Okay, now the job is done. So this EC will be removed from the call stack. As I told you, an EC was created. Okay, I never pushed it in the call stack. I'm sorry. So when EC was created, it was supposed to be put in the call stack also. This is the functions EC. In Chrome Developer Tools, we'll find that the name of this EC would be the function name itself. Okay, so now when the job of this entire function is done, both of the phases complete, this EC gets popped off. Pop operation in the stack. It is literally a stack data structure. Pop is the top of the EC is completed. It is removed from the stack. So this entire thing gets empty. Nothing is remaining over here. Now we see that even the outside EC is completed. The memory phase and the code execution phase for this entire function, which we are seeing in front of you, this entire thing has been done. So what happens to clear the memories and all that? This is popped off. This is again popped off, the GEC. As I told you, the job of the JavaScript engine is to push stuff in call stack, like EC, and do all the job and get free as soon as possible. So this is again completed, done, right? Everything is, popped up from the call stack. Even all these ECs are basically done. Nothing remains. This thing actually happens, because if it doesn't happen, then it will be kind of situation when we'll be having a lot of ECs in the call stack, and there would be memory issues and the time issues, optimization issues, and our system or the web app or something, everything will go down. So you might have seen such kind of situations on different kind of websites. So our job is to write a code which doesn't block JS engine. You have to be careful about that code. For that, basically, if you see callback functions like set timeout and all that, what happens is JS clears all the execution context, but methods like set timeout and all those web APIs, they again create some kind of context in the call stack. They force JS engine to create the context. And, if we try to do it in some bad kind of, we write a bad kind of code, so call stack would never get empty. So the code which is supposed to be, executed below the main code, it won't get any chance ever, or maybe at some later point of time. So it will slow down the performance. Let's say, for example, as I told you, in debouncing and throttling, if we click the button 1,000 times, just imagine right now that 1,000 times that function will be called, like click button. Okay, so that click button will generate an EC. So 1,000 ECs will be pushed in the call stack. 1,000 ECs, just imagine. And obviously it's computer. JS engine job is to clear off all the call stack ECs. But just imagine, let's say the number is 10,000 or maybe 1 million or something. What happens in that case? It would be a pretty bad situation. So we have to have, even if that kind of case arise, we have to have some kind of scenario or some kind of system, management system, so that the clearing of everything happens properly. Let's move towards the more questions. Let me stop sharing the screen. So just remember this figure in your head every time you see a JavaScript code. Every time, it's in my head every time I'm telling you this thing, and it really helps. So I have a tryout for you guys. Just do it right now. It's pretty much important, as I also have marked important tryout. Just see this code. If you want, I'll zoom it. How many people are there? Eric and Mr. Reddy. Can you see the code?
Yes.
Okay, so just try out in a normal way. Take your time. It's totally fine, because start slowly. Like be a rabbit. Kind of actually not a rabbit but a tortoise. Just go slowly and do everything. Create that picture in your head. Or maybe you can also use pen and paper right now, because there would be a point of time when you would never require such kind of box creation in you'll do everything in your head. It will be 15 to 20 seconds. Just do it. This thing. And it again contains some kind of new concept, as I can see in front of me. Like we have a new if condition over here, which is actually a block. So what happens over here, what doesn't happen. I'll be teaching you right now the scopes also. So just tell me about this, like what kind of output which you guys think will be going in this case. Take your time. Go step by step.
Yeah, I would say it will be a reference error, probably.
As in reference error. So like how did you go through the diagram in your head? What happened in the first phase? Okay, we saw that there was, like, can you just tell me?
Right. So I think the first time we in the memory phase, we have X to be undefined.
Awesome, right? Correct.
And then we have function run, and run is assigned the value of the whole function code.
Yeah. So run is a key and the value is the entire code which you see in front of you. Awesome.
Right. And now we skip to the execution part.
Because we also skip this call, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. In the
So in the execution part, we have X assigned to value 10.
10 is assigned to value X, variable
Oh,
X.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. And uh, could you just give me a second? I'll just give me a second. Yeah, right. So yeah, as I was saying, in the execution part, 10 is assigned to X, and then the function run is called. So when we call it, so the if condition is executed, right? So at that time, X will hold the value of 10. So we check for the equality condition, 10, whether 10 is equal to 20 or not. Since
Okay.
it's not equal to 20, we
Okay.
directly go to console.log AAA,
Mhm.
which obviously does not exist in the memory phase of the function.
Okay.
So that's why we would get a reference error saying that AAA is not defined.
So
At least that's what I think.
yeah, so it's kind the flow was totally correct, but not totally correct. It was the output is actually you'll be amazed by this. It will be undefined. I'll tell you why. The most important part is let me undefined. I'll tell you why. As you said, 10 is assigned to X. Awesome. That was really good. Okay, fine. Now we skipped through this code execution phase. Now we see that there is a call to the function. So a new EC is created for the run function, and we go towards this EC, the code in the code execution phase. Now, as I told you, every function when called will create its own EC, right? So the new EC is created, it's pushed into the call stack, and we see that over here, hoisting works. So as I told you, what hoisting does is moving declarations onto the top of their containing scope, right? So we feel that we never got inside this. We feel that if condition never ran, definitely it was never ran. But this, due to the hoisting, you can assume this as like this. Yeah. So what happened due to the hoisting, as the definition suggests, that the inside stuff, it actually gets the declaration towards the top of the function. So it's like this. So even if condition never ran, but this A was assigned a memory. In the memory phase, this A was assigned undefined. In the code execution phase, we tried to assign 50, but we never did. Because this if condition never ran. This is pretty much confusing. I know that that's people call magic and all that stuff. But the thing is, due to hoisting, as I told you, like every variable declaration, like if you see this is a declaration, this is initialization. So every declaration, you can assume this thing as it was not, initially it was bad AAA and there was no declaration like this. You can assume this, that due to hoisting, initialization was done here, but declaration, as you remember, in the compilation phase, everything gets memory. This is the Java concept also. In compilation phase, everything gets memory. So before doing any kind of thing, it has to assign some kind of memory. Okay, so this due to hoisting, AAA got the memory on top. Okay, before anything could have happened, any business logic or something could have happened. So right now, if you see, this AAA will be getting undefined value as a key value pair in the memory phase, right? And we never ran into this code because X was never equal to 10, never equal to 20. Okay, and we try to print AAA, right? So what is the value of the AAA? It's undefined because we never gave it. Or you can also call it, like if you run this code, it will be the same which we did previously. Or if you assign, let's say 100, the value would never be changed over here because it's never going inside. But still, remember this concept that what hoisting does is in the memory phase. So memory phase, how memory phase happens? It basically, in memory phase, it doesn't see any kind of code compilation stuff. It just, the job of the memory phase is to assign memory as soon as possible. So this AAA, before being evaluated or before being assigned any kind of thing, it gets undefined due to hoisting. It is called variable hoisting. And everything this happened in the execution context of this run function. Okay. So am I clear about this question?
So yeah, just to like, for my understanding.
Yeah.
So, so even though the if condition works or does not work,
Yeah.
since the function has its own execution context,
Mm-hmm.
the variable AAA gets a value of undefined. That's what you're trying to say, right?
Yeah.
Right. And but then in the execution phase, since the like the code does not like AA is not assigned,
Yeah.
We don't get the value 50. We
Yeah.
just get undefined in console.log.
Right.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's clear now. Yeah, I totally missed the point that function also has its own execution phase, and all the variables get initialized to undefined in the memory phase. So yeah, that totally skipped my mind. Yeah. No, but now it's clear. Yeah.
So just remember the diagram always in your head. Whenever a question comes in front of you, remember the diagram and remember these two things. We have a GEC, global execution context, and we have a function execution context only when that function is being called. Only when. It makes sense, right? Why to push an EC of a function which is never being called? Now, one more thing, that as hoisting definition, I told you that in the first part of the memory phase, JavaScript engine skims through the code and looks for all the variables. Remember this statement also. JavaScript in the code execution, memory phase, it skims through the code from top to bottom, line by line, and it tries to, or for every single variable, it tries to assign some memory and gives undefined. Okay, so remember this statement. In the memory phase, JavaScript engine goes from top to bottom, line by line, and gives memory to all the variables who require the memory or the functions. In the code execution phase, it again skims from top to bottom and then initializes values, or maybe call the function, or maybe print stuff and all that stuff, which is not the part of compilation phase. Because compilation phase is kind of, if you see the word compilation, English keyword word compilation, or memory it's something like being prepared for running dynamic phase. Memory phase is something being prepared for running the code execution phase. Before executing, we have to be prepared with everything, right? We have to be prepared with memory. We have to have all the variables access so that we can access. Only then we will be able to change this stuff. Only when we'll be able to print this stuff. If memory is not assigned to a variable and we are trying to print, that doesn't make any sense. So we have to be prepared in the memory phase, assign memory to all the variables and the function, and then we can do the next job in the code execution phase. So this is again a very good question, because people will feel that this, because they were not able to get into this if condition, AAA never got the memory and AAA never existed, and we'll be having a reference error. But it never, because due to hoisting, AAA actually got the memory on top when this EC was created. So it's kind of like this: AAA equal to, just this, nothing was assigned, and AAA was assigned over value over here. It's the same code. It's a good question.
Just a quick question there.
Yeah.
So just to get it clear, you're telling that even though, like wherever we like kind of declare variables, they will definitely be in like assigned a value of undefined in the execution context, right?
Right.
Right.
But
so in your previous example, even though if you did not call the function run, would there be would there be the variable AAA as undefined in the execution context?
this function?
Yeah, that one. No, the one we were discussing right now. Yeah. So let's say you did not call the function run.
Okay. Okay, in this case, okay, got it. I did not call the function run.
Right. So even though you did not call the function run, would there be AAA in the memory context, like in the execution context? Yeah.
Why? Because when run never gets called, is there any point of creating those memories?
No.
Yeah. So EC has to be created. I'll show you in now in Chrome Developer Tools practically what happens. We can actually see the kind of theory which I'm telling you. It is not in thin air or something. I'll show you everything which I'm doing right now. So for every code, we'll be seeing in front of our own eyes what is actually happening. Okay. So when we never call the run function, it's like run function just got the memory. As I told you, everything will be copied, right? So this thing will be copied. But once we never called it, so is there any point of creating its own EC, assigning memory to the variables and all that? No. So an EC needs to be there, execution context needs to be there for the variables to be assigned memory and then assign the values. So if you see right now, run never get called, so is there a point of printing A? Nothing happens, right? Even though if you try to print over here, see, nothing happens, reference error only, right? So AAA, if we try to print AAA over here, we were getting undefined. And if we try to print AAA over here, we are getting reference error because AAA is a part of this EC, this function. It doesn't belong to the outside area. Got it?
Yep. Got it.
I
Yep.
know it's little bit confusing, but I'll give you a set of questions also. There are a lot of questions available. And once you do them right, you will make mistakes, you'll learn a lot of concepts. You can then clarify with me as well, or you can look up on internet also. But I think this is the basic which I told you. It will help you a lot. Like the probability of you making mistakes is now dropped down by 50%. I'm pretty much sure. Okay. Now the remaining 50% is something which you have to practice and practice and practice. There will be a point like you'll see the question and you'll know that I know the output. I know the output, right? So if you see, I'm reiterating your question. You asked me that if I never call this run function, okay, then AAA would AAA be printed or would that be defined given undefined memory? No, because with every function we have to create the EC when the function is called. So if we never call that function, there was no point of evaluating this if statement, going towards the memory phase, going towards the code execution phase, and giving AAA undefined. So this AAA was set undefined key value pair in the EC of run, right? So remember these things. EC has to be created because EC is like a virtual wrapper. Without any kind of EC, nothing would happen. Okay. And there are multiple ways, like I can create a function, I can actually create a constructor function. And even though like, everything is being done over here, AAA is a part of run, I can still access it outside. So there are other concepts like how to access them outside using dot operator, creating constructor classes and all that. That's a different part, like we can cover that later, but this is the core concept. Let's move towards the next question. Question 4. Okay, I think we'll be able to do this easily. Try to do this. It's again a beautiful question. I'll tell you why. And one thing I'll tell you in in one line or two lines, because that is again a big part. Scopes. What is scopes? I just told you about hoisting. There is a concept in JavaScript called scopes also. What is scope? Like, again, if you want the definition, scope is region of the program where a variable can be accessed, right? Like basically, can we access X over here? Like, let's say we didn't have X. So can we access X over here? So that is a part of the scope. It's a pretty much big part. I'll tell you in a later point of time, but try to do this question right now. Create all the ECs and make sure that always the preference of printing or accessing that variable, if the name is same, is given to the inside EC, right? So if you try to print, yeah, you just try it on your own. I'll explain it to you. Just go by step, create all the ECs, maybe use pen and paper and assign the memories and just tell me what would be the output. Just remember this thing, always preference is given. It's like lexical scope, I'll tell you at future point of time. Like inside, like if you declare a variable inside the function, and if it also exists outside the function, first preference is given to the inside variable. But how it is given, it is again related to the execution context and all that. So
Right.
that,
So in that case, I would think that the console log would give undefined.
let's check. And you're right. See, undefined. Why? Eric, are you with me?
No, not really. Can you explain why?
Uh, Explain as in like why undefined? Okay. No,
Yeah.
I'm going to explain definitely. I'll explain everything. I'll just wanted to confirm that you are with me, like you are seeing the code and all that. You're actually trying to do it. So what happened over here? Do you want to explain?
Yeah.
Red, Mr. Reddy? Like, do you want to explain or I should go more because
Sure. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm actually outside, so I'm going on and off with the audio.
okay.
So yeah. So what's happening here is, so we start the execution context loads, and then in the initial memory phase, we get X as undefined,
Correct.
and we have display as the whole code of the function.
Okay. Got it.
Now, when the display method is called, the function display gets its own execution context. So within the execution context of the function, we get the variable key as undefined. So for var x equal to Python, we actually get x as undefined in the memory phase of the function. And then in the execution context, since console.log is given before the assignment, we take the value of x to be undefined. But had the console.log been after the assignment, we would get Python as the output. So I think that is how I can explain the situation.
Yeah, that was perfectly right. Eric, are you with me? Like, did you get this or like I can explain it again?
So in order to get JS, you would have to console log before the display.
Yep. Right.
I see.
See,
What about after the function, but before like the call?
like putting this after the function
Yeah.
doesn't matter. It will print JS and undefined.
So it's because that console log in the function is taking its own X and not worrying about.
Exactly. So I'll go through the code once more as he explained perfectly, but still like I can do it once more. What happens? Just I'm repeating this statement. Whenever you see a JavaScript code in front of you in interview or OA, you just have to go through those phases. Let's assume that how I do it, it's like uh, just assume that is 50% part of this stuff. Just chop this down the code into left and right part. Like you can have your own ways. Go through the first phase first. Var x, okay, x got the undefined memory. Okay, now we see console.log. We skipped it in the first phase. Now we see display. So this display gets the memory. How? Display is the key. This is how it gets the memory. Display becomes the key, and we have the entire code, whatever it is written over here. Nothing is checked. No error is checked right now. It's just simply copied over here. Okay. Now we go down, we see that there is a call to the function, but we are still in memory phase. We skip it. We skip it. In the second phase, in the code execution phase, we again go towards it from top to bottom. We see that JS is being assigned to X. Okay, awesome. We assigned it. Okay, but that JS is assigned in the GEC, global execution context. Okay, now we see that there is a printing of this console.log. Okay, we print it normally. Now we see that we have a display function. Okay, this is not part of the code execution phase. We have already given it memory. We see that there is a call to display function. This is the part of the code execution phase. So a new EC is created. Since we call the function, a new EC is created, a new wrapper is created. In that, again, the same thing happens. Okay, just be with me.
Okay.
Again, the memory phase starts. In the first phase, we see that there is console logging. Nothing happens. It's skipped. It's not part of the memory phase because it doesn't require any memory. In this, we see that, okay, X is something which requires memory. So this X gets memory in EC of this display function. Okay. In the code execution phase, we again go from top to bottom. We see that, okay, we have to print it. This is the part of the code execution phase and we print it. So at that point of time, just tell me what will be the value of X, Eric?
Undefined.
Undefined, because until we still have time to reach this line, right?
Yeah.
If we try to log over here, we'll be getting after that, right?
Yeah.
So this is the entire concept. You have to go one by one, flow by flow. You might feel that it might take time, but solve, let's say 20, 30, 40 questions and all that, or similar kind of questions. You don't have to, worry about new kind of questions, and you'll be like totally fluent with this thing. You see,
Yeah.
do you strongly feel that this can be an interview question? Because people get confused, and our job is not to get confused. Our job is to do it quickly in a jiffy. Like let's just going from top to bottom, doing the memory phase and the that compilation phase. Okay, now I'll show you whatever every theory I told you. We still have time. Okay, now I'll show you how actually developer tools handles this. Whatever I spoke in front of you, it is real, it is not imaginary. I'll tell you, I'll show you. This called this. These are still variables, right? I'll show you over here. Okay, sorry, index.html. I've already loaded this JS index.html. Okay, so it's already giving an error because in developer tools it already shows that if we are doing something, because we are printing X and it doesn't exist. So let's try to change it. X, and over here it's and let's see this carefully. So even you by yourself, when you're doing questions and all on different websites, you can do this by yourself also. So I'll put the debugging over here. Console, display, and then logging, and then display. Everything basically I'm covering.
Jatin?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like I'm not able to see your Chrome screen. Like I am only seeing your Visual Studio screen.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Resume share. I don't know why it stopped sharing. Okay, new share. So I'll do it again. Can you see my screen now?
Yep.
What I did right now, I'll do it again because you guys probably would be doing it. Okay. So I just linked this to my HTML file and I'm just opening it in opening the HTML file over here. Okay. So I have the source, I go towards the source and I have the entire index.js file wherein I can debug and make changes. You guys must have used developer tools before this, right?
Yeah, but not the debugging tool.
Okay.
Like we just use the other stuff. Yeah.
So every theoretical concept which you can see, not from my side, but everywhere, you can actually do and see on by your own. Because not everyone tells you 100% of the information. They are not able to share, but you can see by your eyes on eyes. So I'll put some breakpoints over here.
Right.
So we'll see clearly what happens. And I'll put some breakpoint over. Okay, so it started. So see, as I told you, just see carefully. Just remember that image in your head. When I started this file, I refreshed this page, the JS was loaded. What happened? We see a global scope. That is a scope part. I'll tell you after this. See the call stack, the stack which I created. We have the anonymous, right? Anonymous is basically the global developer, Chrome calls the global GEC to be anonymous, right? So it doesn't have any name. So global execution context is basically this. So we, in the call stack, that execution context is pushed in. Okay. Now, the thing about developer tools is I showed you memory phase, right? So memory phase has already happened. There is no way to see the memory phase in developer tools, but there is a way to see the code execution phase. So by the time I refresh this, anonymous call stack was pushed and everything got its memory. If you want to see this, we'll find global X somewhere over here. See, global X undefined. So memory phase has already happened. We cannot stop the Chrome to see the memory phase. Is everyone with me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So memory phase has already happened. We are right now in the code execution phase. Okay. Since the memory phase has already happened, so global X must have been, set the undefined. So we see global X is the key and undefined is the value. Also, we'll see the display function also. So if you look out for display function, if you see, as I told you, display is the key and this entire function which you see in front of you, right? Can you see it?
Yep.
It's literally copied. It's literally copied. Okay. Okay. So display got its memory and the global X got its memory. Right. Now we are going towards the code execution context. So just a second. So we are at this point of time. JS is supposed to be assigned to global X. After I click this button, we are stopped at this point. Code execution. JS is supposed to be assigned to this global X. So I'll clearly see what happened over here. Global X is right now undefined. If I click this button, if you see global X, see JS has been assigned. Okay, and this logging has been skipped. This logging has not been skipped. Actually, it has printed also. If you see, JS has been printed. Okay, now this display was skipped in the memory phase, but in the code execution, sorry, not in the memory phase, in the code execution phase, this display was skipped because it was part of the memory phase. But this display call is being done. Wait, why it's not? So once more, I don't have any control over Chrome developer tools, right? So that's why. If I click this button, global X is right now, where did it go? Undefined. Okay, if I click this button. So right now we are at this. Display hasn't been called yet. We have a breakpoint over here. So why did it jump from directly from JS to this display after logging it? Because that's how the code execution phase works. So display is about to be called. Remember, display is about to be called. Okay, so what happens when display is about to be called? When it's called, Eric?
Could you repeat the question again, please?
My question is, in the code execution phase, we assign JS to global X, as we clearly saw. Okay, yeah, over here. Now we are at this point of time line. We are about to call the display function. We haven't called it yet. So what happens when display function is called?
It goes into the memory phase and then just takes all the stuff
Right.
in the function.
Before memory phase, a new EC execution context is supposed to be pushed in call stack, right?
Yeah.
So that everything which you told can actually happen, because without EC, nothing happens. So if I click this button and display is called, just see carefully, this call stack will change. See what happened just now. A new EC with the name of display has been pushed in the call stack, right?
Yeah.
And in this display, the code memory phase has already been done. Chrome developer tools never shows us memory phase. So we are right now in the code execution phase.
Okay.
This line is supposed to be called just now, yet it hasn't been called. We have a breakpoint over here. If I click this button, it will be called. And if you see, since the memory phase has already happened, so display X has already got the memory undefined, right? So if you see over here, undefined. And that is not in the global part alongside global X, because it is a part of display EC, not the part of the global EC. So if you see, you won't find display X over here alongside global X. Since global X was the part of the global EC, you saw it in global part. Okay. In the local scope, you'll find display X because it is a part of the display exe.
Okay.
Okay, so it's still undefined and we are trying to print it. So what will print? Obviously undefined will be printed. See, now we are assigning Python. So display X is still undefined. We are in the code execution phase. This line hasn't been called yet. Okay, and when I click this button, it will be called. So when I click this button, Python will be assigned to display X. Done. And we didn't put a breakpoint over here. I'll do it once more. Just a second. Okay, so Python will be assigned over here just after I click this button. See, Python has been assigned. Now we are at this point of time. This line hasn't been called yet. If I click this button, this line will be called. And at that point of time, the display X is holding the value of Python. So right now we are having these outputs. Okay, if I click this button, we'll have Python also. So can you call you Venki? Venkatrami, because there's a friend of mine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Venki,
sure.
Eric, did you get this? Did you see with your
Yep.
eyes?
Yeah.
Yep, it's pretty clear. Yep.
Any code which you see and you get confused about, oh my God, what just happened? You don't have to go to Stack Overflow. Just do this by your own hands. You can do it. Okay. Stack Overflow is something, what I consider Stack Overflow is something, it's kind of a boon and ban for the web developer community because we don't know the basics and we go towards there and we don't find pretty much good explanations over there. We just find the answers to our problems. So, it's like working hard with the answer by yourself. It's a good thing because you want the probability of finding the similar kind of problem in the future. It's high and the solution should come from your own side. So see, you can do this by your own hands. That is the power of Chrome developer tools. So if anyone wants me to do it again for a different kind of code, just let me know. We have one more code, a lot of codes over here. Like, let's say we can do this for the simple code actually. Okay. Let's put this breakpoints. So we have breakpoints everywhere, right? So again, I'll do this. Memory phase has already been done. I have no control over the memory phase in the developer tools. So in the code execution phase, so since the memory phase has already been done, name is supposed to have undefined value. Let's check, is it having? Let's go towards the bottom. Name. Name is having. Okay. Name is having undefined. What just happened over here? Is it the same name? Yes, see, now see, I don't know why. Maybe I have declared that name variable already in my, I usually am into using console a lot of times. Like whenever to check the code, I do this, I do this. So maybe that was getting the value. So ideally, you see, when I face this situation that a name was having some kind of string and not undefined. Did you guys see that name was having some kind of string?
Right. Yeah.
So something popped in my head, how it can be possible, why? And I had the solution also because I knew that this can never happen. It's supposed to have undefined value. So that is the power of getting towards the basics. So see, memory phase has already been done. So a name is supposed to have what? Undefined. So if you see, we have undefined value over here. Okay, now
Yep.
in the code execution phase, we are yet to run this line. So after I run this line, I'll see something on console. Okay, so I'll see something on code, the console. Okay, what I see, it's basically why it's not printing undefined. I cleared this. It should print undefined.
No, I think you have to change the variable name inside also. It's just
Okay.
name for now. Yeah.
See, now again, here is a gotcha. Why it didn't throw any reference error? Name doesn't exist, but actually what I did is in the console, maybe at some later past point of time, I used the variables. I have this, see, I can access this name variable. So I would have, I could have done some debugging and all that in the past time, and that's the reason I can still access name. It's still in the global execution context of the Chrome EC.
Right.
So scope. So let's change this a name. So right now, code execution phase, we are expecting to see undefined, not John Doe. Let's see. Yeah, we got undefined. Now we see that John Doe is yet not assigned. This line is about to run. If we see a name is still undefined, if I click this button, John Doe will be assigned to it. Okay, I cannot see it because EC. You see, EC has been removed immediately. Let's try to print it. That's how JS engine is very much fast. Okay, now we'll be able to see. So we saw undefined, and John Doe is supposed to be assigned to a name. See, it's assigned. Okay, and if we try to print it, everything gets printed, console, John Doe, and if you see, everything gets removed. You remember me clearing and erasing all that stuff on iPad? That thing actually happens on call stack on scope also. The job of JS is to create the execution context of functions and the global execution context, and do this stuff and just get away as fast as possible. So if you see call stack has been completed, scope has been completed, we cannot see anything over here. Okay, so that's how JS engine works from inside. And I think that's enough for today for JS. I do have a few more questions. I can just share it with you, like, and you can try solving it. You'll be able to easily solve it now. At least you'll be able to think. Thinking is much more important. Making mistakes is totally fine, but if you're not able to think, you are like hoisting, but you never knew how hoisting works, and you're never able to apply those kind of concepts in in interview question. That is a problem. So in an interview, when you make I think you're not able to see my screen, I guess.
Yeah, the Visual Studio. Yeah.
Yeah. So in interview, uh, let's say you got a code and you make mistakes. It's totally fine. Like, fine as in you might get few less points, but the thing is, interviewer will be seeing like you are approaching a problem in a different kind of way, in a proper way, I must say. Like, about the basics, like what is memory phase, what is code execution phase. And mind me, most of the senior developers, even it's possible that the interviewer which is in front of you, he or she might not even know about these core concepts, or maybe he just he just doesn't remember. So if you make him realize about these kind of concepts, you'll, even though you kind of made some mistake, you made some tiny mistake, or you forgot something, but still, if you're sharing this kind of information in front of the interviewer, he or she will be impressed, definitely impressed, and you might have a something in favor of you, or you might not make that mistake in future point of time. So you, at least you should have information. Making mistakes is totally fine, but again, you can avoid making mistakes by practicing a lot of problems. I have a lot of good resources. I can share it with you. Obviously, I cannot create multiple questions by myself, but I'll share it with you. Or maybe you can just try out online, just pick up a random question and try to solve it. And with every question, you'll feel that there is something which is new coming up and you want to know. So before solving any random question, we'll still have to solve a lot of other concepts like scopes, okay, hoisting, this keyword, what is this keyword, and all that. Once you get grasp of all those concepts in your head, it's like you store them, and whenever, it's like a hash map in your head, key value pairs. So like this concept is being used over here, let's pick that. So you pick that from your hash map in your head, and you just applied that concept and you get the right answer.
So a quick question here, Jitin.
Yeah.
So hoisting is nothing but you know the variables having key value pairs in the memory phase, is it?
Hoisting, yeah, you can say that.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
It's like, in simple words, it's like we can access variables before even initializing it. Or as you
Right.
said in the first answer, that we are somehow able to access the variables in the code, like before even declaring or initializing them. But if you see, variables always get declared first. So it's better to say we can access the variables before initializing, not declaration.
Right.
Declaration needs to be done, because if we try to access a variable which hasn't been declared being, it never got the memories, then we'll be getting reference error. So see, every keyword which you use in your statement matters.
Right.
An example, You just saw me using, it's a question for you, both of you, or maybe, someone who is seeing this video. I use this thing over here. Yeah, in this code, you see, used this if x triple equal to 20. Can you tell me the difference between double equal to and triple equal to?
Yeah, I think double equal to only checks for the value, whereas triple equal to checks for the value and the type.
Okay.
Like the type of the object, or the data type, basically, of what is in comparison.
Okay, got it. It's partially right. I'll tell you what is wrong about that definition. Eric, what about you? Whatever you know about it, just tell me, like whatever you know. It can be correct, it can be incorrect. It's totally fine.
It can, I think.
Come again?
Sorry, what was the question again?
I was asking, what is the difference between double equal to and triple equal to?
Oh, so triple equal is comparing the type and the value, and I think double equal is just comparing value.
So the definition which you guys gave is partially correct, but I am giving you a definition which is 100% correct right now. And if you tell this definition in front of anyone, you have to amaze the interviewer, basically, right? And I'll tell you 100% correct definition. What happens is, if I do this, let's say, let's do it in developer tools. It will be awesome. Sharing is paused again and again. Sharing is paused. Okay, so if I try to do this, we get true, right? Everyone is with me, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Let me zoom in more. Okay, it doesn't zoom in the console tools. Okay, so if I try to do this, I get false, which makes sense, right? So if someone asks you a question that what is the difference between double equal to and triple equal to, you can give multiple examples, but the core concept is what double equal to does is double equal to picks the right candidate. Just think about it, okay, and listen carefully. Just picks the right candidate, whatever it is in front of it, and it typecast towards the left candidate. It actually changes the type before comparing by itself. Okay. What triple equal to does is it simply takes the value and simply compares it. So instead of saying that there is type checking happening or value is happening or they are doing this, the system, the JS engine actually, when it sees double equal to, it picks one. It sees that there is it's an int value. It actually converts the type to a string and then compares. And triple equal to, it sees that, okay, we have a triple equal to, we have strict equality, so we don't have to change the type. So if you see in double equal to, we have an overhead of what? Converting the type. So there is a difference when we use triple equal to or double equal to. We never get deep into it, but there is actually a very strong difference. Double equal to has an extra, overhead on it. It has to convert the right type to left type to check the value, and triple equal to never does that. So it's better to use triple equal to instead of using double equal to when we know the type and all. So the correct definition is double equal to operator when the JS engine, double equal to doesn't do anything. When JS engine sees that we have a double equal to operator, then it explicitly by itself converts the type of right part, right stuff which we have given it to the left part and then compare it. In triple equal to, it doesn't convert the type. So that type conversion actually happens. It doesn't check the type. We don't have the type. It actually converts the type. So there is an overhead. It's cost, like we have a cost over there. Even though it's a big of one operation, constant operation, but still there is a cost. So always it's better to use triple equal to in your React code or JavaScript code, whatever. It's again JavaScript entire. So it's a kind of good point which you can make in front of someone. So again, how did I get to know about this? Because I got my basics clear. Okay, so whatever I'm telling you, you can find everything where on the original documentation. Get into it, deep dive into it. You will start actually falling in love with JavaScript and the core concepts, because no one is falling in love. So that is the thing. Like you can get a plus point, or you can get kind of a favor in your skill set, that about the basics of JS, which most of the people doesn't have. So that is how you give a reply to a question which is asking definition, if you have basics clear, only. So maybe and 2 years or 3 years before, even I used to give similar kind of explanation. Even in an interview with ServiceNow, they asked me this question: what is the difference between double equal to and triple equal to? I gave the exact similar definition, that double equal to compares the value and triple equals to compares the time. But that is an partially correct definition. Correct is the type conversion actually happens. Okay, so it's better to use triple equal to, not to use double equal to. So to remove the overhead. Okay, so resume share. Sachin, are you with me? I think he's just joined. He's not here. I was thinking of actually, doing 1 hour of JS and 1 hour of DS. Do you guys have bandwidth right now to do more? Hello?
You mean more of JS or more of the class today?
JS is done for today, not too much for JS of today. You have a lot
right.
Yeah, so like maybe datastructural algorithms, do you want to work upon it at maybe some later point in time, like whatever you say?
I mean, yeah, we could do another, couple of minutes, 15, 20 minutes, 15 minutes probably, just to, like, you can just touch up on the basics.
Okay, basics.
Yeah.
As in DSA, I'll pick up a standard basic concept, which is, a lot of concepts are there. I'll pick something which you might straight away can use it today also. Okay, let's get my iPad. What about you guys? Like, are you guys, coding on Lead Code and all those platforms?
No.
Yeah, not much. Like, I have a fair knowledge of DS and algos, but not much into coding in the coding platforms.
But as I told you, I'll tell you what kind of questions do they, do these FAANG companies, or, not mostly the startups, but the FAANG companies. Maybe, at later point of time, you might have to turn towards the FAANG companies. You can right now start working at not non-FAANG companies, but it's like always having in head that I have to reach. You should have a bigger goal in your head. And for that bigger goal, I'll tell you, I have a set of questions which they usually ask. Like, for example, again, I've curated this question by myself. Implement the debounce function. As I told you, implement the throttle function. So you have to actually use JavaScript to code the entire thing. Okay. Implement a linked list class. Implement a hashmap class, which has get, put, and all those methods. Okay. Implement the reduce function. Implement the map function, reduce map, and the filter function. Okay. Implement a binary search tree. Implement a binary tree. Like the questions like this. Okay, they're having a lot of questions like this, and all these questions, what do they expect? The implementation part is like you should have the basic of the actual data structure. Let's say they ask you to implement hashmap, so you must have the knowledge of hashmap. That's why you can do, like, you must know how to store the key value pairs, like, and for that you have to have the knowledge of JavaScript objects, because in JavaScript the hashmap is basically implemented by two ways. It's like you use the original JavaScript object. I'll tell you. If you talk about the hash map, which again, I repeat, it is one of the most important part of DSL Go for front-end engineers. So if you talk about the hash map in JS, it's basically implemented by two ways. One, it's basically you create an object, let's say var map or any name. Okay, and you mention over there that let's say we have to add some value. So what we do, map of whatever, like map of 1 would be equal to xyz, map of 2 will be equal to 33 or whatever it is. Okay, so we created a map. It will look like this. Key and value pairs. So key would be 1 and this would be xyz. The most important point of this hash map using this objects notation is these keys are stored as strings. Whatever you pass over here, if you pass int or if you pass string, if whatever you pass, it gets parsed into a string and then the value is stored. So 2 will be getting the value of 33 since we pass the string. But for value, like if we I did like this, it was not a string. So oh, just so this is a normal map which you can create in JavaScript. Okay, and remember this thing, it will come in your way a lot of times when you are actually solving a coding question or maybe doing some project and you store. You never know because you always pass the value, like you passed 1 or numeric 1 to the key or 2 or 3, but all those key values, they are all converted to strings, and then they are stored. One more way to create a map in JavaScript, which is kind of a wrapper class we are having. It's kind of a constructor function or wrapper class. It's inbuilt, like we can use it. We can basically make sure that, like, let's say we are having var map equal to new map. Okay, and then we can use these already predefined methods, map.set, and we can set similarly 1 to be xyz. Okay, and then map of set 2 would be 33. It will look in a different way since this is actually what we are doing over here. Again, it's a part of the JS basics. We are calling the constructor of a class. So we have a class in JavaScript like this, and over there we have a constructor, and also we have a lot of methods. Let's say this method set. So what we are doing is we are calling the constructor, and we are using the new operator alongside it, and a new object has been created, and that object has been given to this map, the address of that object. So, and we are running these functions using that object map.set and map.set. Okay, and we have also map.get. So two ways to implement hash maps in JavaScript. One is the object notation. This is the object notation which we did previously. So everything in JavaScript is object, as in Java also. But there are a lot of difference between JavaScript is not Java, but JavaScript is kind of, using syntactical sugar on top of everything which it was having previously, like classes on top of constructor functions. There is a lot of stuff in JavaScript. So this is kind of the object notation to construct a map. So actually this is not a map. Okay, this looks like a map, but this is kind of an object only, wherein we set key and value pairs. We use it as a map, but this is not the actual map, right? But this is supposed to be the actual map. We have a class. So what they'll ask you to do is they'll ask you to create this thing. Okay, they'll ask you to create this thing, and you will use this object notation to create this thing. For example, let's say they ask you to create my map. So what I'll do is, I'll just give you a normal idea, not deep idea. Right now, my map. Okay. Since I cannot use the already built class, I'll use the object notations, because that is obviously, that is the basic of JavaScript. I should use it everywhere. So my map, and we'll have the constructor function. Again, the way I am doing things, this class and all that, again, it is a part of JavaScript ES6 fundamental. So we'll have to go through that at some later point of time, or maybe you can go through by yourself using the documentation. So constructor function. Okay. And we'll have a, let's say we have a function similarly to this class. We'll replicate everything over here. We'll have a function, let's say set, that would be function that would accept what, a key and a value. Okay. And also, since it's a map, we can also get stuff also. So get, and we'll having function and the key only, we can get the value of any function. So this is kind of a, I'm not doing it deeply, because we don't have enough time today, but this is kind of a overview structure. So when someone asks you such kind of implementation question, you have to draw this kind of thing. You have to make, actually you have to code this. So we'll create a class, we'll have a constructor function, we'll have two methods which you asked us to do, set and get. So before any question, you must ask like, what kind of functions do you expect, set or get or something. So similarly in Hashmap, you all know that if we have this map 1 to be XYZ, so we can get, let's say the map is A. In JavaScript, how can we can get it? A of 1. If we print it, log it basically. So we get the output as XYZ. I'll show you right now. Okay, so similar kind of operation we can do over here. What we have to do is, in the constructor, we'll create an object, this dot A. Again, we are using this over here because again, there's a lot of story behind it. We'll have to cover at some point of time. This dot A would be an empty object. In set function, what we are going to do is, we are going to access this dot A of key. We simply set it, return nothing. And this in get, what we are going to do is return this dot A of key. We can also make a lot of improvements in this code, but this is kind of a basic structure. So what happens is, now our own Hashmap class has been implemented, the basic, one of the basic ones. There is nothing more than that. We have to take care of the clashing also, because in maps there is clashing. There are certain algorithms to handle those clashes. And again, what if one key can have multiple values, or one key can have single value? There are a lot of other things. This is a basic map. Okay, so now how to call this map? As we did in previous original map, what we are going to do is, we'll new my map. So we kind of call the constructor function. This constructor has been called. Okay, we assign this to where my. Now my dot set, we pass on 1 and XYZ. My dot get, we pass on key. So this will set 1 to be XYZ. Okay, and this will give me output as XYZ. Is everyone with me?
Yep.
Yeah.
So you see, I'm not deep diving into it today, but this is how you have to do stuff. They'll simply, what we have already in JavaScript inbuilt, this is something which is inbuilt. This is okay. They'll ask you to implement it by your own style. So you can use this object literal, this one, and create your own class. So in front of you, I just created my own class within a span of what, like 2 to 3 or maybe 5 minutes explaining it to you. Obviously it might contain a few problems and all that. We problem as in we can make it little better, or we can add more collision handling algorithms, a few algorithms. So this is how they're going to ask you questions. So you have to clarify what kind of expectation which you have. So this is a very basic question, and that's why I told you Hashmap is very much important, because they'll throw it in front of you, implement the Hashmap. They'll be vague about it. You have to ask them, what kind of operations do you expect me to have, like set, get, and what if there is a collision? Like, do you want me to have unique pairs, or do you want me to have, like, let's say key is one and I can have multiple values? So we'll have to see that at every key we can assign an array or maybe a linked list, because there is a lot of difference between arrays and linked lists if you talk about the time complexities and all that. So this was just the overview, okay? And apart from it, there are a lot of things to work upon. I think that would be enough for today, because it's already enough time. But maybe one more thing. Let's talk about something about complexities. Again, interviewers do like complexities discussion. If you see that they give you a question and you solve it, let's say they give you a question that implement search. Okay. Now implement search, you can easily do that implement search in JavaScript by index of. If you do this, like let's say we have array 1, what kind of output is this? Yeah. So we have a x, y, z. Okay. So we have to search. Let's say they ask you to, what kind of searching algorithm would you deploy? And the normal thing which we can think of in JavaScript is to a dot index of, let's say they want me to search x, or let's say z. So z. So I'll be getting what? I'll be getting 2. But what about the time complexity of this? They'll ask you, even if they don't ask you, you have to discuss it. Like, what is the time complexity of my operation? It's basically big O of n. And why it's big O of n? Because let's say z is standing over here, or maybe z is standing over here, or z is standing over here. In the worst case, you always have to talk about the worst case. In the worst case, you have to traverse through all these members and look for the our final answer. And you can find that in the worst case, you can find that final answer at the last of the array. So basically you traverse through all these elements, and let's say we have n elements. So you have to go towards the n checks to do our jobs. That would be big O of n time complexity. So this is, basically this is called a linear search. Okay. So what they'll throw it at you, what you actually didn't ask. They told you that you have an array and you have to search for an element in it. Okay. But where did you go wrong is you didn't ask, is that array sorted? What kind of edge cases do we have to cover? Can that array have negative values? What kind of values the array is having? Can it have this? Can it have that? So you have to cross question them, because if we have a sorted kind of array, let's say we have this array 3, 2, 1. Okay. If we deploy linear search would give you big O of n complexity. But if this array, let's say, okay, this is already sorted. Let's make it. Let's make it 2, 1, and 3. So this is unsorted. So if we deploy linear search, we'll be getting O of n time complexity, right? But if we have the array as sorted, like luckily we found that the interviewer is giving an array which is already sorted. Let's say 1, 2, and 3. So instead of doing this linear search, what we can do is binary search. Binary search drops the time complexity from O of n to O of log n. Just imagine, I'll tell you how much good is it. Let's say n, the value of n is 10 raised to power 100. Okay, if you take the log of n, that would be log of 10 raised to power 100, which is 100 into log 10. And log 10 base 10 is basically 1. So the value is 100. So n was having 10 raised to power 100 value, and log n dropped that value to 100. Just imagine the kind of drop in the time complexity. So this is why, if you haven't asked the interviewer that is the array sorted or can we sort the array, then the time of, we could have given him a O of n complexity solution. Maybe we, if we don't even use index of method of the JavaScript, we can use a normal loop that will fetch us a pretty much average complexity kind of thing, O of n. But can we do better? Definitely we can. So if the array was sorted, we could have done this like this way. And just imagine, let's say we have 10 raised to power 100 and we got the answer as 100. So see, it's like the time complexity dropped from 10 raised to power 100 to 10 raised to power 2. One more thing, let's say the interviewer tells you that the array is not sorted. Array is still 2, 1, and 3. Another thing, what you can do is, one question was, can we sort the array? And interviewer might tell you that you can definitely, like, why not? Or it's your own choice. So if we sort the array, if we use the library function of, the JavaScript as well, obviously we won't be implementing our own sort function unless he or she tells us explicitly to do that. So what we do is we basically, this is a normal function which we implement. You must be knowing about it. If A is less than B, comparator operator, then we basically return -1. Else if A is greater than B, then we return +1. And how this sort function works, you guys can see, or maybe at some point of time I can tell you. Else return 0. Okay, so this is going to sort in an increasing order, this function, how I made it to look like. So this is going to sort this array to be 1, 2, 3. And this sorting at the back end, most likely Python uses stem sort, that I am pretty much aware about, but JavaScript, I think it uses some kind of better implementation of merge sort. Okay, and it all depends upon the length of the array and all that. There are a lot of cases, like we can also use counting sort. It actually drops the time complexity of sorting to be very good, but depending upon some certain constraints. So this is going to sort our array into 1, 2, 3. Let's take the worst case, that array was lakh size, or 10 billion size or something like that. Okay, so in that case, the time complexity of normal sorting is n log n. Everyone knows that. Okay, n log n. So first operation which we did was sorting. So we did sorting. Sorting cost us n log n operation. Okay, now we can search the element. Okay, or we can apply the binary search. Now apply binary search. So we sorted and we applied the binary search, and binary search runs in big O of log n. Okay, so total time complexity, what is the total time complexity? It's basically sorting plus this. So n log n plus log n, which is asymptotically, we can cancel this out. It's n log n, because it's much smaller in this case. So we have to always take the worst case. So this is much bigger. So n log n, right? So again, there are multiple ways to do the job. Like we can deploy sorting, we can deploy this. Linear search would fetch us big O of n also, right? So that was always, this was better than n log n, obviously. So you have to cross question, like, can we do this? Can we do that? And what about the time complexity? Interviewers love time complexity discussion, even if they themselves are not pretty much good at that stuff. Okay. But at companies like FAANG, they want you, the engineering managers and all that, you have to show them something which your inclination about discussing the time complexities. There is one more complexity, space complexity. It is a different kind of thing. It's like the memory consumption and all that. But what is the main thing? Time complexity. Okay, so this is just an overview of how you're being asked questions and how you should approach them. There are multiple ways to do stuff. Okay, we have counting sort for the sort operations and all that. So like you can sort beforehand, but you should you should tell them that my operation cost me this time complexity, so I can do this, I can do that, this is better, this is not better, why this is better, why this is not better, why I can do that. These kind of discussion is something which they are expecting. Okay, so clear our basics and have such kind of good discussions, and I think you'll be good to go. You can go slow, but be prepared for with everything. Be like a tortoise, that I must say. Don't be like a rabbit and going through all that stuff. I have to learn all the frameworks. I have to go through everything, but leave the basics around. So you have to go slowly, but do everything that it becomes your superpower. Okay, so that's it for today, and I think I spent pretty much time on JavaScript, so I was not able to spend on data structures. But you got the idea, like how this stuff is going to happen. Okay, time complexities and the hash maps, and we have a lot of stuff. But that stuff is important. At some point of time, you'll need them, not just in interviews as well. So it's a common pre-assumption that front-end engineers don't need knowledge of DSA. It's not right. I must tell you. Let's say you're building a functionality. Let's say, even I was building a dashboard functionality, search feature for dashboard, and over there we had multiple leads, 10,000 of leads. But at that point of time when we were building that stuff, the lead number was not that great. So, but I, as a front end developer, and having the DSA knowledge, I thought that in later point of time I could have such kind of a huge number of things. So I have to make the product scalable, at least from my side. I cannot do back end, but at least I can make my front end solid and robust. So for that, what I did was, instead of using normal searching operation, for normal searching, as I told you, we can use index of, right? We can use JavaScript's index of. But instead of index of, what I'd use was try algorithm, try data structure. So try is something which drops your time complexity to a greater number, and it provides a fast search operations. Maybe a lot of companies like Walmart, Amazon, for these search operations, they definitely have deployed this try data structure. So it's like you should have the knowledge of data structure. At some point of time, you might require it. Definitely not just for the interviews. You don't want to make a product or a project which is not scalable. At least do best which you can get on your own, whatever you can. So, and the common misconception is like, we don't need uh, like the knowledge of data structure. It's pretty much weird. I don't know why people say that. Obviously we need to have knowledge of everything, even about the system design, even though we are not backend developers, but we need to have some knowledge of, because we'll be working as a part of the team. And it's not like when people are discussing about distributed systems and load balancers, we just keep shut, we don't have any knowledge, even though we are front-end developers. It's not like that. We have to have knowledge. Okay. So Eric and Venki.
Yep. Yep, got it. And I know this is a bit of a weird question at the end of the class, but I was not there at the beginning. So could you like introduce yourself?
Okay. Do you want me to show the slide or what? Okay. You were not in the beginning of the class. You didn't see the slides.
No, I was not there. Like I joined, I think 10, 15 minutes late probably. So that's why.
It's actually very important, because you'll have the idea of what you can expect. So about me, like I have years of work experience. I worked at startups like OYO Rooms back in India, and with co-working and Infosys MNC. And my prime focus has been front-end engineering. Okay. Like executing front-end engineering at Infosys also. And also, but like you can say that I have also worked towards the back end, but something which I'm confident about is front end. Like I love JavaScript, and I literally use vanilla JavaScript in my last company for 1.5 years. We didn't use any framework, I must tell you. So that made me actually fall in love with it, and that's why I love to clear all the concepts of JavaScript. It's good to use frameworks, but it's best to have the basic knowledge also, which can back, because always React, Angular, everything is built upon the JavaScript itself. But again, without frameworks you cannot survive. Obviously a lot of startups would definitely deny you. Even I got an interview with a startup. It gave me a, they told me that we need a view guy, and you are not a view guy. Like, and startups are someone, they want immediate hiring. So if you know view, or if you knew XYZ framework, come to us if you clear the interview, obviously. But we cannot like kind of give you some time to work upon the framework. So it's like you have to have the knowledge of framework, but the knowledge of JavaScript is something which will, like, it's gonna make you future proof. And as I told you in the previously, I'm repeating this again and again. FAANG companies, FAANG companies never ask you to code in React or Angular or something. So that's why I talked to Sachin also, like Sachin can, teach about the React and all that. And that's why I also shared him with this information that students must do JavaScript fundamentals also, because you don't want yourself to, to skip those doors, like FAANG company doors, just because you don't know JavaScript and you are not able to answer a few standard questions of JavaScript, because it will actually make you feel bad about yourself, right? You don't know the basics and all that, and don't be the framework guy. It's good to learn frameworks, but also clear out basics also. And again, FAANG needs it. Okay, so again, I'll go through this. What kind of software engineering and development profiles you can expect? SDE, as I repeat, already said, SDE is basically software development engineer who is backend heavy, experienced. Like if you apply for SDE positions and you're experienced, maybe 1 year or 2 year, then most likely you'll be put in a team. You'll be mapped to a team. Okay, you'll map to a team which will ask you to do more of a backend work. If you are a fresher, then you are probably to be mapped according to a resume to a team which might be a backend heavy or front end heavy, whatever. You will be doing a lot of things. Okay, at some point of time when you feel that you can go towards this thing, you can basically join that team or something. So it's not like you will be joining some backend stuff only in if you are fresher. Okay, so about the typical front end engineer positions, let me present this. For the typical front-end engineer positions, they'll definitely ask you to do front-end only, nothing back-end. No handling databases, nothing, nothing stuff like that, load balancer, system designing and all that. You'll be primarily focused towards the front-end part. So again, it's better to apply for both the positions, not the front-end engineers positions. Like the thing is, they want some experienced people in front-end. This is the only issue. In SDE, they have new grad positions in which they can accept freshers. Mostly this is about the FAANG companies. Okay, and about the SD versus front-end interviews, as previously mentioned, that data structures, they are going to be data structure heavy if you are applying for SD position. Okay, doesn't matter in your resume you have mentioned that you have JavaScript or something, but if you are applying for SD position, expect them to ask you questions either in online assessment or in something else, like maybe front face to face. That DP, dynamic programming, trees, graph theory, and all that. All the Crystal Prim's algorithms. Big algorithms. I'm telling you, they are easy. Okay, just because you don't know them, that doesn't make anything tough. But this is what I'm telling you, they are going to be heavy, like graph theory heavy. About front end, typical, let's say apply for front end position. So you'll be most likely be getting an online assessment which will be curated to front end. Like I got an Uber assessment for JavaScript specialized assessment test on Code Signal. So that was totally curated for JavaScript, nothing else. Okay, nothing else. At the end, they messed up, adding some more things. I don't know what happened wrong with them. They told that we did something wrong with the assessment, but most likely you'll be getting stuff which is curated to just front end. They'll ask you to maybe create some widgets online using HTML, CSS, DOM manipulation, or they might ask you to, basically code in JavaScript. Or even if they give you a DSA question. So what question can you expect is arrays, stacks, queues, hash map, or hash table, whatever you call it, searching and sorting. Just like I told you, implement the hash map. This is the Uber question. Like in the online assessment Code Signal, this was the pretty standard question which mostly people get on Code Signal or something. And just like implement your hash map, and you must have this, you must have that, you must have get operation time complexity would be this, not the guest, but the put and all that stuff. About the design, this is something which a lot of people miss on. System design, you must have heard about this term. High level design, low level design. This is something which is related to software development engineers, SD, backend positions. So you have to worry about the product design if you're applying for front end positions. But it's good to have knowledge of, this SD positions also, HLD, LLD, because they are not tough. Just because we don't know it, that doesn't make it tough. Okay. Or you mostly have to focus towards the product design. Let's say you are working on React and how to manage the state. How does a state get trickled down? Like every component have a shared state or every component has its own state. So you have to make those decisions. Like it depends upon, like, if, for example, let's say you are building a cart and you are building a checkout page. Okay. So cart and checkout page both contains what? Similar kind of products and the count and maybe the amount as well. So you can somehow map the, depending upon the situation, you can put a common state for them. And in the checkout page, you can just add the price, and in the cart, you can display just the stuff. which you are displaying, right? So they can share a common state. So there are some different kind of scenarios depending on what kind of situation they put you in. And again, what kind of, what is the motive of the company? Let's say company, as in, what they care more about. They care more about this, they care more about that. So that is all about the product design, state management, like how to trickle down the state, reusable components. That's the reason class and constructor functions are important in JavaScript or React. You create whatever component they ask you to create, you have to create it a reusable component. Let's say they ask you to create a widget even in an interview. They'll tell you design a carousel, design a widget, or let's say design a tooltip, which we normally use. So that tooltip, you have to talk about the design also. They didn't tell you just code it. Coding is later on. The first part is to design it. For designing, you have to talk about the product design, like what kind of look it will be having. That's basic pretty much. And what kind of, like, do you want me to do it using a class so that I can reuse that component multiple times, because tooltip is something, or carousel is something which we can reuse multiple times at different pages, right? So make it accordingly, like make it like a component which can be reused at multiple places. RESTful services, okay, like how will you interact with the APIs when you create a product, design it. Web performance, how can you improve it? And yeah, that's what, that's it all about the product design. So Facebook calls this system design for front-end engineers as product design. Okay, most of the companies will say you that there's a system design interview round and or design this, and you can just skip on the databases part or distributed systems part. Okay, so if someone tells you product design, then it basically or implicitly means that you don't have to worry about this. But a lot of companies will tell you that we have a system design round and you don't have to worry about the databases or distributed systems or load balancers. Just tell us about the front end stuff. So that basically means the product design. Okay, so again, what FAANG expects from front-end candidate? Light UX design. As I told you, if they ask you to, design a carousel, design this, design that, design a rating. This is a pretty standard question for Amazon also. Design a rating container, like you can rate multiple, like we rate movies on IMDb or something. So that, what kind of interaction should that container should have? Light UX design, like it should actually have a star, what kind of color, and those are some basic things. Mostly they expect you to have strong JavaScript fundamentals. As I told you, that's the reason I am here. And about the HTML CSS, obviously HTML CSS is pretty much important for the front end engineer. And one thing which I mentioned previously is that you should be well versed with how to write the code from scratch. They won't give you a boilerplate. They might give you a notepad and ask you to write the HTML file, write the JS file, and write the CSS file. So you have to do it by yourself. For example, like you have to create the head tags, body tags, HTML tags, meta tags, and while explaining them, like writing them, you can explain why meta tag is important, or you have to link them. Like we link JavaScript file with the defer keyword. Why we do that? Because they'll see this. They won't say you, but they'll see that you was using. Why are you not using a defer keyword, or why are you using a defer keyword? So defer keyword is basically used to load the JS after the DOM has been painted, so that no error happens. Let's say in JS we are trying to access an element which hasn't been painted yet, so that would throw us a reference error, okay, reference error, no type error or something. So that's why we need HTML knowledge also. They'll ask you to code from scratch, and even if they give you boilerplate code, it's okay. It's good to learn working from scratch. I know in React or some framework, you always most likely you just pick up the boilerplate and do the job. That is fast, but in interviews that doesn't happen, especially in FAANG. Do not expect them to give you a boilerplate. CSS, again in CSS, there are a lot of properties, I know that, but you should be well versed with the basic properties. Common interview question is like, how do you align, vertically align or horizontally align an element? People don't know it. What is the difference between display inline block? If you go read on the uh, documentation of CSS, you will see display, inline, and block have a lot of things under the hood going on. There is something called inner display, there is something called outer display. So if you explain these concepts, if they ask you, or if you come up with some problem and you know that this kind of basic knowledge, so you can solve your own problem. So it's a good point for you. They do expect such kind of knowledge from you. Obviously, you can try hit and trial run on clone developer tools to find which CSS property works for you, but I think that is kind of a temporary approach. have a good approach that you have to have good fundamentals of CSS also, and knowledge of latest trends as in ES6. So you can create functions like writing a function keyword, or you can also create a function by using arrow functions. So they expect you to have knowledge of both, and drawbacks of every and pros of every. So basically pros of functions, using functions, and pros of arrow functions, and cons of both. So that kind of knowledge they expect from you. Also promises. There is a concept called promises which developed in ES6 and then trickled down to React and Angular frameworks. But promises is something which came from JavaScript, and they expect you to, they ask you to build your own promise. Yes, this is an interview question. I think Facebook's or Amazon's, they ask you to build your own promise. Like they ask you to build your own promise to consume it, and promise.all function and all that stuff. Like they ask you to build debouncing and throttle and all that. So you should have knowledge of latest trends. Let's say they ask you to build a promise and you don't have anything information about what promise is. You might be good at coding, but you don't know anything about promise. You are totally out at that point of time, because promise is something which you need to have the knowledge of. It didn't come like right now. It came in 2015 or 16. Okay. That's the reason you have to have the knowledge of latest trends. So if they use keywords, you should have the knowledge. So even if they drop the bar for DSA, but they increase the bar for front end stuff. So it's kind of a balanced stuff. Don't expect them to drop the bar for everything. Am I still connected? Hello?
Yep.
About the JavaScript topics, as I told you right now, function hoisting and variable hoisting. It takes a lot of time. I just tried to do this in 1 hour or something, but you have to work on your own also. We have variable and scope function hoisting. Then we have scopes. If you remember, we saw the global keyword in the Chrome developer tools, right? And then we saw the local also. Local was made for function, and global was made for the normal, root execution context. There is something called lexical scope also. Okay. Prototype chaining. What is prototype? What is chaining? Prototypal inheritance. Debouncing, throttling. As I gave you an example also, like clicking a button multiple times, making sure that even if the user clicks the button multiple times, somehow you don't stop it. Okay. Let him click it, but make sure that your system doesn't get done. That is the best user experience which you can give the, to the person. We don't have to ruin the experience. Click it 1,000 times. It's okay. Click it 1 billion times, but we won't let you actually make the API request 1 billion times. That is, smart approach. So that is basically debouncing and throttling. About the context switching using call, apply, abandon. These are three important methods. Call, apply, and abandon, wherein you change the context of this keyword. Basically, this keyword is again a very big concept, but pretty much easy concept if you learn the fundamentals. People, scratch their heads. Literally, they scratch their heads when they don't understand what this means. Where is this pointing to? What is this what is this, and all that. You can read thousands of medium articles, but you never can understand this. And you might read one medium article, and might read one original documentation of JavaScript, and you can understand this in a way that you can teach thousands of people. So this is again important. Map, reduce, filter. As I told you, they can ask you to implement map, your own reduce, your own filter. We directly use it in React also, like we array.map, array.reduce, array.filter. So to implement them, we have to know everything about map, reduce, and filter. Like what map does is map actually creates a new array. Okay. What reduce does is reduce, take a accumulator. Okay. Let's say we have to sum all the values in an array 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so we have to use which one to use when. So reduce have an accumulator parameter which we can use to do stuff. Filter actually works, creates a new array, but it doesn't work for all the elements. It only works for values which are defined in the array. Let's say we have undefined values in the array, so it won't run that function on this. So there is a lot of stuff behind this thing. So to implement map, reduce, and filter, definitely you must be having the knowledge of map, reduce, and filter, right? Like how map functions, how reduce functions, so that you can discuss with the interviewer that these are the features of the original map from JavaScript. Do you want me to implement all these features or not? So, but if you don't know anything, if you don't have internal details about reduce function or filter function or map function, how would you be able to create your own map, reduce, filter? That's why. Okay, this keyword, as I told you, event loop is something which makes sure that nothing is kept pending and it picks up from the callback queue. pushing the callback stack so that everything gets its own time and everything works in JS. It is some different kind of concept, but it is again, pretty much important. Callback functions, as you all know, deep copy versus shallow copy. Like you have an array and you have to deep copy it. Let's say you have 1, 2, 3, 4 in the array. You can obviously copy. So it's basically depending upon the call by reference and call by value. I think that is one of the most important part of the entire programming language, not just JavaScript, but Java and all that. Call by value and call by reference are usually, instructed by instructors in a way that they are just definition, but they are the real thing. It can, a thousand of questions can be created on just call by reference and call by value, like debugging or output questions, and people scratch their heads like what to do. We don't know anything about it and all. But if you understand call by value and call by reference, you will know what is deep copy and what is shallow copy. This is again an interview question. Deep copy or linked list, deep copy or array, or shallow copy or something and all that. So for shallow copy, we have a function which is inside the JavaScript itself. But for deep copy, we have to recursively call that function again and again up to the nested level so that we get into depth of the, the input which we are having. DOM manipulation, as we all know, like how to manipulate the DOM, document.query selector all, or document.get element by ID. Again, nowadays people use document.query selector all if they are using vanilla JS. Okay, because query selector all is better in terms of that it allows CSS properties, and the normal one doesn't allow CSS properties to add into it. Again, Es6 syntax, arrow functions, you have to know arrow functions. And when you know arrow functions, you will think that there is a new world of arrow functions. The definition of this in normal function and definition of this in arrow function is totally different. But why is it different? Again, it's the basic thing. Once you get it, nobody can beat you. Classes, as I told you, I just created the class map, right? So it's nothing but it's syntactical sugar on constructor functions. So you can actually call a function, you can actually instantiate a function also. Depends upon how you are doing this stuff. So you can normally call a function like function display and this console.log xyz, and you can actually call it, or you can call it in a way that an object has been created. It can act as a constructor function. It can act as a class also, like kind of a class. Okay, so there are multiple things. Let and const keywords. These are, again introduced in ES6, which we usually use in React without knowing what is hoisting. So hoisting works in different way with var and in let and const. There is a totally different thing in let and const. Generators. Generators are again useful. We use it with loops. They're not that useful, but you should know, like they do ask. Promises. Again, promises is one of the most important thing. Let's say you made an asynchronous call to something, like something which is to be happen at later point of time. Let's say set timeout. So after 1000 millisecond, run this function. So at that point of time, promises return us something, like they won't be running that function immediately, obviously after 1000 milliseconds, but they will be returning us something, a promise that we will run this function at later point of time, and we are pretty much sure about it. So you have our promise, and then we can consume that promise. We have a lot of things which we can operate on that promise. So interviewers would ask you to implement your own promise chain. This is a pretty much good question. Like you have to own, you can do it. It's easy. It's not tough if you have clear all the basics. Apart from this, DSA topics, as I mentioned, arrays, stacks, queues, linked lists, hash maps, and hash map is one of the most important part. Trees, BST, binary search tree is important. Tree traversals as in order, pre-order, post-order. Graph theory, nothing matters. You don't have to work on Kruskal's algorithm, minimum spanning tree, Dijkstra's, Bellman-Ford, or Kosaraju, Tarjan algorithm. But for front-end engineer interviews, you have to worry about DFS and BFS. But if you want to go towards SDE positions, and maybe in future you want to go more into DSA, then you have a lot of algorithms in graph. You see, Facebook is entire graph. What is Facebook? Facebook, it's basically connections of friends and all. It's the entire connections of all the people. It is a graph. Facebook is a graph. So you can say that. So can you expect Facebook not to ask you a graph question in an interview? You cannot. So the company which is built using a graph data structure entirely, mostly, it will definitely ask you a graph algorithms question. So like for typically front-end engineer interview, you can skip on right that at this point of time, but maybe in future you should have to worry about that. Like when you grow, when you want to grow up in the hierarchy. Heap is something which which you usually use in function, in programs or something, wherein heap gives you a better time complexity. It has multiple uses. I'm telling you, maybe it's not important as of now for you, but it's good. It's good to learn about sorting. You have to know quick sort. They'll ask you to implement your own quick sort. On exam, they'll ask you to create functions which works like quick sort. They'll ask you to build your own merge sort. At the backend, I think JavaScript sort function works like merge sort, but you have to do it on your own. Okay. And you have to know how to implement this. Counting sort. Counting sort is a very beautiful sort function, which until now, the best time complexity would have been n log n. Counting sort is something which drops the time complexity to big of n, but with a few constraints on the inputs. Like you have to have a range of input limited and in such way and all that. So if you have the knowledge of counting sort, which is a basic sorting technique, it's not that tough. You just have to use arrays and all to store stuff. If you present this kind of thing in front of interviewers, even if they don't require it, you see what kind of positive feedback are you supposed to get. And again, depending upon the situation, you can choose which one to deploy: quick, merge, or counting, or maybe heap. So depending upon the situation, maybe depending upon the inputs. So as I told you in the previous question, it all depends. You have to ask the interviewer what kind of thing which you are expecting. If there is a particular range defined for the inputs in the array, then we can deploy counting sort. Why to use the merge sort? Because counting sort will be even much faster. About the searching techniques, as I told you, linear search gives you big of and time complexity. Binary search gives you big of log and complexity, and that is a major drop from 10 raised to power 100 to 10 raised to power 2. See, binary search is a very efficient thing, and you might be using binary search in a lot of places wherein you have a sorted array. Example, I'll give you a real life example. uh Let me check. Yeah, so let's say, let me think. Let's say in your company you're building a project, and a lot of data is being coming in the database, right? And you're storing in somewhere. Let's go towards the high level idea. First user comes in, first user logs in your system. It gets the ID of 1, then second, then 2, then 3, then 4, and then 4. Basically you are storing them in array. So the first one is stored in the 0th index, second one is stored in the first index, third is stored in the 4th index. So basically, kind of they are sorted in a way, sorted by time in which they came, right? So why to use JavaScript index of function over there to look out for the people in your array, or maybe look out for the deals, or look out for the people in the entire database system, or your front end, basically, if you can say. Just deploy binary search, because you know that everything is sorted according to some time slot or some kind of thing. You have some kind of sorting over there. So whenever you see a sorting, immediately in your head it should strike that I should use binary search over there, not the linear search, because linear search is big of n, and binary search drops the time complexity to a huge factor. If you remember the log and graph, you must know that when input gets real high, the the time complexity actually, it's not getting that much high. It's kind of constant, stagnant, and all that. It's like 10 raised to power 100 turn, 1000 turns to be 10 raised to power 2. That is a big optimization. What, even if it's front end or even if it's SD interview, what they are expecting from you, regardless of dynamic programming or something, they, whatever you do, you have to talk about the complexity. Have the habit of talking about the complexity. Have the habit of questioning JavaScript internal functions, methods, like index of function. Index of is an O of n function. So why to use it? Why should I use it? I'll build my own, right? And a lot of functions which JavaScript is having, a lot of, like, you can say that map reduce filter. Again, map reduce filter is big of n. So why to use it? Depending upon the situation, I can switch. Like I cannot use it. I'll use this. I'll use that. So start questioning stuff. Start questioning internal tools, because that questioning will lead you to having discussions with those interviewers, and that will definitely lead you to something good. Okay. I think that is all. So Venki, are you okay with the reintroduction of the stuff?
Yeah, yeah. It's a bit overwhelming, but yeah, I'll get used to it.
It seems like a long journey. The thing is, it's not about uh, you know number of months or time. It's about consistency. If you do it every single day, if you work upon the hoisting technique, which I told you, every single day, if you have the that diagram in your head every single day, I'm telling you this thing, this that is not going to vanish away from my head for it will stay in your head and you'll be able to solve questions quite quickly. So be consistent. Even what he's teaching you, Sachin is teaching you, be consistent in everything. Do not do much, but at least do something. Like, I'll recommend you guys to do, solve lead code questions. And if you haven't started solving, and solve at least two questions in the worst case, at least solve easy questions. There will be a point of time when you feel that even lead code easy questions are pretty much tough for you. But there will be a point of time when you will be able easily solve lead code medium and hard questions. So it all depends on the practice. You have to practice a lot. Practice is the key about JavaScript, about coding and all that. So what you can do is, when you're solving a DSA question, you can actually use JavaScript language so that you get the habit of coding in vanilla JavaScript also, right? So this thing happened with me once. I was given an interview like a few months back, I think. I think last year or something. So I usually used to code, lead code and all those questions in Python, because Python is pretty much easy and it helps you save your time. But what happened? They didn't have any option of Python in online assessment. They just gave me an option of Java and JavaScript, or I think something. And I actually forgot Java, a lot of things, about it. So I faced pretty much, situation wherein I knew the logic, but it was taking some time to implement because I was making silly mistakes. Because again, Python is something which you have been doing, let's say, for 6 months, and suddenly someone asks you to code in Java. So have that kind of superpower that you can switch between languages also, because it's an online assessment. Okay, they won't judge your logic. No one. It's an automated system which is judging you. So try to code whatever language you are choosing to code in DSA or something. Try to code in JavaScript as well, because that will help you practice for the vanilla JavaScript, and like, which you can use it in, building widgets or giving interviews, or maybe in React also, and also in the normal DSA. And that's how you will also be being well versed with map, reduce, filter, sort. You just saw me writing the entire sort function by myself, right? Comparator function. So because I have used it 1,000 times, like right now, until now, because so that's how, so you'll be using vanilla JavaScript more and more, more and more, more and more. So that's why, like, I'll recommend you use JavaScript for solving any DSA question also. You have multiple tools. Whenever you feel, you can switch between multiple languages. Like if I have to solve a heap question, since heap has been implemented inbuilt in Python, so I use Python. And for everything else, like wherever I can use JavaScript, I use JavaScript, because the map reduce filter are pretty much good. They make you not worry about the edge cases and all, and so that you can focus on the logic. So that's why at most places I use JavaScript, so that I don't have to worry about the edge cases. So that's how you have to do the job. Okay, Eric, are you with me?
Yeah.
I know it was a long discussion. I usually talk a lot. I know that. People tell me like talk less, but when a topic of my interest or something comes up with which I am having experience with, I just you know, go through the flow. So I think that's it for today. And do work on hoisting. Learn something about scopes also, because they are kind of connected. And I'll share you some questions also, or you can find it questions on Geeks for Geeks or multiple sources. Try to solve all those questions, because if you're applying for front end, you'll be getting these questions. Definitely, you'll be getting these output questions or debugging questions in your online assessment, or in the face-to-face interviews. Randomly, they'll give you a random question, a basic standard question like console.log x, what it's gonna print and why it's gonna print that. Right?
Yep.
It can be a warm-up question. Warm-up question. Then they can switch over to React, building widgets, building this, building that. But a warm-up question can be definitely this kind of coding question, debugging question, or printing question. Okay.
Cool.
Awesome. So I'll just shut off this meeting. I hope Sachin is there. I don't know.
So, yeah, will you be sharing all those the materials, the PowerPoint presentations and all that stuff?
Definitely, I'll share it, like maybe until this evening or something. I'll share it everything and all the codes, and I'll share you all the resources also, where you can read more about scope and hoisting. Now if you'll read the documentations or Medium articles, you'll feel that you know everything, and you'll feel that medium articles, you can contribute to the medium articles, because this is a pretty much common sense, right? If someone knows, someone reason, someone cannot share 100% of the information which is he's having inside his head. So if you read medium articles, definitely you can expect that they are not sharing 100% of the information. So that's the reason, like now you'll read articles and stuff, you'll know that you can map a lot of stuff to this thing and that thing.
Cool. And like, just how can I connect with you? Like, is there any like LinkedIn or
Yeah, you can
Slack?
LinkedIn. I'll share the link.
Cool.
Okay. Okay, Eric.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, that was a great session today, Jitin. Thank you very much.
It was my first long session of consecutive 3 hours. I don't know how Sachin does it for, I think 6 hours or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, if we share something which we know, which we are good at, then even the 3 hour session doesn't feel like that. So I'm glad that you are still connected with me, and most likely a lot of people will be seeing this recording, and I do hope that they get benefited. And I'm telling you, everything which I have told you, you can easily find on internet and all that stuff, all the knowledge, but it's spread out, right?
Right.
Which Sachin shares, it's everything is spread out. The job of the other person is to bring everything in one place and share it in a way that someone else is understanding the proper way, right? And tell you something which those people or those information didn't share it with you or something. And one more thing, I'll recommend you guys to go through documentation, original documentation. I'll share you the link as well. Let's say you want to study about map or reduce or filter in JS. So Mozilla Docs, please, because all the Medium articles, all the YouTube videos, they are created from this documentation. Once you do this, you can be the master of everything. Mozilla Docs. So what I do is, whenever you want to find or learn something about it, you just basically, you can just Google it and search for the Firefox docs, MDN docs, and that
Right.
will take you to the developer.mozilla.org, and you'll get everything over there. Okay. But
Yep.
again, what to read, what not to read, how much to read, because let's say even reduce function is, a lot of functions if we use directly, let's say index of, or let's say something, they have a lot of parameters, but we are mostly concerned about the first parameter. We don't know about the second, third, or fourth, or fifth parameter. But originally they can accept those parameters, right, in those functions. But knowing how much and knowing what, that is a difference. Like, you don't have to spend a lot of time, but still, if you want to clarify more things, you can always refer to MDN docs.
Right.
Okay, so I'll end this
Cool.
session here. It's
Yep.
good to have you guys still connected and actively participating, telling about the outputs and all that, and talking. It's good. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.